peripherals so I can see what I look like more authentically, because it's very difficult to tell in the stupid camera.
Okay, well, hi everyone. We are. I am delighted tonight to have a lovely guest with me. We've actually. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but I have a guest tonight named Casta Hex, or Cassie, we can call her. And Cassie, why don't you tell everybody about yourself, and also why don't you tell everyone about your look that you're wearing tonight?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Casta Hex. I am a historical drag queen. I am a practicing pagan, and in my daily life, I work as an embroiderer for costume for film and TV. My look tonight was kind of a contrast to what I wore last time, where I looked like a swamp witch. I wanted to look a bit more regal and pretty, so I've given a little bit of a William Waterhouse-esque Eleanor of Aquitaine, Lady of Shalott, a bit of Morgana Le Fay, a bit of Alicent Hightower, a bit of various medieval damsels. I wanted to look soft and pretty rather than evil, which
you look very pretty.
Thank you.
And I was mentioning also, it looks like you're wearing like faux beetles, like, you know, like the.
Oh, no,
same...
they are. They're Thai beetle wings.
They're real.
Yeah. The earrings, yeah.
Let me see. I'm going to close. Oh my gosh, amazing. And you have the H sort of like on your necklace for Hex.
Yeah. I had this custom made because I'm that person. Well, I had this custom made. The actual jewelry I made myself just from pearls and beads and bead caps. But the H is, my play on Anne Boleyn's.
Anne Boleyn, of course. Hi, Natural. How are you? So anyway, well, what we're going to do tonight. So Cassie is, as she mentioned, a drag queen, but also coming in from England. By the way, I should mention that you have a lovely British accent.
Oh, thank you.
So for my fellow Yankees and Canadians, we'll appreciate that. I always love having guests from overseas. It's always really fun.
It's really not too exciting. Although, to be fair, when we were in the States, everyone seemed very enamored of the accent. I will say.
They love it. Oh yeah, it's huge. It's a huge hit here. Or Australian, that's the other one. Hi, Denise. She says that the H necklace is amazing. It looks wonderful on you.
Thank you.
And Kitty dressed in pink says, person pink swaying hair. She's like, well, no, yeah, and Cassie can't swing her hair because she's wearing a crown.
No, that's very precariously balanced. So I will not be doing any hair switching. And also, I'm wearing quite large earrings that this hair will catch in. So I have to sit portrait still all evening.
And Carl likes to refer to himself as a drag duke.
Work. I respect that.
So what some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Now, Cassie works in film and TV, and she works as an embroidery artist. So if you have any questions for Cassie, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, she can't speak on anything specific about any particular show.
Because there's a lot of NDAs
that
I'm literally currently shackled by. Probably very generalizations. But
and if you have a specific question about embroidery or about the business or that type of thing, she can definitely address that for you.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start off, Cassie? So I've had you on last time. It was like maybe a few months ago, and we had so much fun. And after we were sort of talking about your work and everything, we had some fun dishing a little bit, which was really fun. And we've actually just, before we went on live, I said, hey, you should come on when we do Game of Queens, when we do the review for House of the Dragon season 2. Yes. So she said she would be willing to do that, which will be so exciting. Yeah.
I'll probably, by the time it's out, I will probably be able to spill a little bit of like insider tea and, where fabrics came from and the process of certain costumes, if a costume I've worked on or was there when it was being worked on. I mean, I was there for about 4-5 months, so it was quite a lot, although everyone was kind of in the camps, and everyone was kind of given a character, and I was kind of mainly doing Damon, and then a little bit for Baylor and Raina, and a little odd bit for Alicent here or there, and a bit of Helena, but it was very.
In my last video,
of the room was green.
In my last video, I was talking a lot about Michelle Carragher, who is one of your colleagues, and I'm a huge huge fan of hers. So it'll be exciting to see. It seems like this year is a lot of embroidery, like a lot. So that'll be super exciting to talk about.
There was, I think when we were talking about it, I think she said in season 1 there are about 30 or something key pieces, but it seemed like double or triple that, I think. I mean, the embroidery for that was hot, like some of it was Michelle, myself, Ree, Claire, Kenese, like a small team in-house, and then some pieces were sent out just because of the sheer volume of everything. So yeah, it was a real privilege and a real full circle moment, having been obsessed with Game of Thrones, read the books, watched the show, and the show really made me want to be in costume. And Michelle's work always grabbed my attention. And then, you know, I emailed her when I was a student and she emailed back, and then fate just kind of twisted in the way that we ended up becoming, you know, colleagues and friends. And she's incredible. She's so generous with her time and her expertise, and she's hilarious. I couldn't be more grateful to have her in my life, really.
The other reason why I'm going to be really excited to have you on Game of Queens is because one of my co-hosts, Rebecca Bax, is also a witchy witch. So you're Wiccan you were mentioning, so I'll be...
Yeah, I don't really use the word Wiccan because their stuff is a bit lighter and softer. I'm a bit more traditional. I just use the word witch generally. Wiccan, I don't really identify with as much.
Okay, so that'll be great because I can introduce you to Rebecca, and hopefully you guys will be fast friends, which I'm sure you will, because she's lovely. So, and then we'll have Tatiana, who is, of course, my very passionate Spanish co-host, and she's always a huge delight. So, anyway, yes, and Carl says, "Nice chalice, chalice in the palace."
It is actually my altar one, but I do
your altar. Okay,
I do.
There it is. Yes, it's lovely. Yeah. So, all right. So I know last time we had lots of great chat, and you mentioned, why don't you just tell everybody, in case they didn't get to see you last time, about your background and how you got interested in medieval history, medieval costume. I think it's medieval mostly that is sort of your area, or historical, I should say, historical.
Yeah, I think generally I like to class myself as a sort of time traveler. I live generally anywhere between kind of late 1500s and about 1890. I know it's quite a long period of time, but that's my sweet spot. And some of the Victorian I don't do because it's a bit insane and Teletubby like. I don't really love certain eras. I don't really fuck around with Regency, to be honest. It doesn't do a lot for my shape. I have like one Regency dress and that's it.
I saw your Regency dress. I really liked it, actually. Yeah, you were in a garden.
I went more sort of Bridgerton with that. I think that worked, but I think that shape and strictly historically accurate for that era doesn't do a lot for me. I do enjoy the day wear a lot. I enjoy the bonnets and the Spencers and Pleasers. I don't really love the evening wear. It's not special enough for me. But so I kind of started embroidery. My grandma taught me embroidery when I was quite young. And then, just always knew I wanted to get into something creative. I used to draw historical dresses a lot. I'd pore over Janet Arnold books in the library and like draw from them. And then I sort of got to an age where I was choosing what I wanted to do and said, oh, well, I need to take textiles if I want to do this. And just kind of went through A levels and college, and then did a costume design degree. And actually I specialized in design for screen, not making. And then doing drag, I realized very quickly that I wanted to wear historical things and not off the rack or leotardy type. So that very quickly made me come to the realization that I can't afford to have someone make me an entire historical wardrobe, so I need to do it myself. So I kind of just forced myself to learn how to sew based on the foundations we learned at uni and the sort of hand skills I had from, way back, and just kind of force myself to do it. Really. I think the first thing I made historically for myself was a pair of stays, which is wild because I think a lot of experienced costumers don't like messing around with corsetry.
No.
But yeah, I like to throw myself into the deep end and just do it. And funny enough, the easiest thing to make really is probably a pair of simple trousers, and I've only recently got around to doing trousers. So
Wow.
I work from the back forward.
But like now, like for obviously for your drag clothing, do you have like a studio space? Like, where do you work out of? Do you have a place in your home, or do you have a spot you go?
It's literally like a kitchen table set up in my bedroom with a sewing machine, and then all my cutting out and pressing is just on the floor. It's
wow,
very, very inglamorous. But that's costume, really. It's not glamorous. Everyone assumes it's, you know, gorgeous giant studios, and 90% of the time it's a freezing cold warehouse that's not very well lit. And, you know, you're all just sort of crammed in around one microwave of a lunch break. You know, it's far less glamorous than people would imagine.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember years ago, when I was working in theater, and they were building a new theater building in my city of Toronto, and they had asked the head of wardrobe, like for specifications, like what would you like to have, like what kinds of things would you like to have, and what kind of storage would you like? And she thought this was amazing, but when we finally went in there, we were like, everything had been cut.
Yeah,
the ceiling was really low. We're like, what's with the ceiling? And everyone's kind of crammed in there. Yeah, they didn't listen to her at all.
No, it's not one. I mean, you need windows, really. Skylights. Like, if I had my own studio, I'd want the window from the Tim Burton Sweeney Todd, like that giant roof garret window. Lots of natural light is good, but then just giant, like, angle poised spotlights, like right over the embroidery that you're working on. They tend to forget, and that you're a couple of days in and you think, oh, I can deal with this, it's fine, and then you're like 2 days in and your eyes are straining and you're like, no, we need some lighting, please.
Here's a great question from Denise. I think this is great, especially given what you were talking about working on that bodice earlier. She said, what is your favorite and least favorite fabric to work on when you're costuming? Great question.
Okay. Here, this is a real anecdote. This is somewhat triggering.
No,
don't worry. I'm just kidding.
Triggering to you?
Yeah.
Or to all of us. Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. My favorite fabric to work with in the entire world is linen. A lot of people really hate how wobbly it is, but I've never really had an issue with that. I think if you just press it right before you're cutting it and press it during, it's fine. I like that you can finger press linen. I like that you can dye it to whatever shade you want. I like that it comes in different weights. I like that it holds embroidery well. It holds paint and screen print well. It holds breakdown very well. Linen breaks down beautifully. This gown is linen.
Oh, really? Wow. And did you buy it the natural color and you dyed it?
No, this linen was a very unfortunate leaf green color, like chemical, nasty leaf green. And actually, when I was on My Lady Jane, my friend Pearl, who works as a dyer at the Royal Opera House now, but she used to she still does film and TV freelance-ish, but she mainly works in the Opera House now. She dyed it for me one lunch break because I said, oh, this fabric is not what I wanted at all. Can you make it a sort of beetly, bottly green? And she just knocked it up one lunchtime. But yeah, linen is for sure my favorite. Least favorite, 100p without a shadow of a doubt, silk velvet. I can't. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, especially when it's draped from the shoulder and you get that like Galadriel, Elrond, Arwen shape. It's beautiful, but it doesn't press well. It doesn't hold embroidery well. There was one costume on HOD season 2, which was silk velvet, and I had to embroider it, and it was very, very stressful. it was creasing and wrinkling, and it was a little bit of
now when you because I've seen with Michelle, oftentimes she'll do it on organza first and then applique it. So were you having to do it exactly on the velvet itself?
It was just on the dress, yeah.
That must have been terrifying to do that.
It was all of the trim and stuff we were using was like various metal, like antique metal braids and stuff. So the photo of that one leaked, and it was actually the dress that's in the poster. That's the close-up one of Alicent's face. And it was very, very stressful.
I can't imagine. And also because, velvet, it marks, if you don't, I've tried using a needle board, like to press it. It's just like, it's really awful. But also it leaves little marks if you stitch it and you have to pull it out. Like, it's just, whereas linen is a lot more forgiving.
linen is my favorite. I do like I do love a cotton velvet. Cotton velvet holds structure beautifully, often doesn't need interfacing, and it holds paintwork and stuff well. My Winnie costume that I made, my Winnie Sanderson dress, that was cotton velvet as opposed to silk. And it just presses nice. It holds a shape. It's harder wearing. It takes...
I've talked to a lot of cosplayers and they don't like using natural. They prefer oftentimes using synthetics. What are your thoughts on that?
It depends what you're doing. For certain eras, synthetics you can get away with a lot better. For anything that needs a lot of fluffy volume, particularly 18th century and 1830 and 1890 sleeves, where you want like a lot of gather but structure that holds itself up, you do kind of need real silk, or at the very least, if you're using synthetics, you need to back it on a real silk organza or a tulle or something.
Sure.
It took me quite a while, just because of a financial thing, to justify silk for things. But now, when I make 18th century skirts particularly, I do kind of insist on it, because it just holds its shape. Like, if I've made several 18th century dresses, and the ones that are synthetic skirts with the same petticoat, the same bum pad, look just kind of somewhat almost A-line. But then when you see the real silk, it looks so much fluffier. So
interesting.
You do notice certain things. Real silk, taffeta especially, synthetic taffeta does not really hang like non-synthetic taffeta. It's great for linings. It's great for, I used it for capes quite a lot, synthetic taffeta. But yeah, if you want anything with any structural integrity, you need real silk.
Those are really great answers. My next question for you is, okay, so we were talking a little bit about your background and your schooling and everything, and you did mention that you started, and actually it's interesting, you were saying about you were sending some communications to Michelle Carragher, which I thought was interesting, because I've had a few other designers on here and I've said, what's the best way to get into costuming? And they said, if you find a designer you really like, you can, try not to maybe hit them up on Instagram, but, find out the proper channels to approach them. And oftentimes that's the best way. So was that sort of your into getting into a film and TV?
Yeah, I'd always been obsessed with Game of Thrones particularly. I think there are a few sort of things that made me want to do costume. Hocus Pocus was one when I was little. I just thought the colours and everything on those costumes was so engaging.
I love them.
And then other films, for sure, Game of Thrones, which I kind of grew up with, really. And also Crimson Peak was incredible.
Yes, and you and I have the same taste. My goodness.
Yeah. I live for Crimson Peak. And Marie Antoinette, the Sofia Coppola one, is obviously beautiful.
Yes, of course.
Elizabeth the Golden Age with Cate Blanchett is perfection, sheer perfection. So all of those movies kind of boiling potted for me. But yeah, I just kind of emailed her. I was at uni in my early second year, like I just started second year, and was like, oh, I need some advice, work experience to start setting up things, and just emailed her. And she sent me a giant, 4-page email, bless her, with advice and encouragement. And then a weird twist of fate, I got a work experience placement through uni that they arranged to trainee on the Secret Garden movie, which had Colin Firth and Julie Walters in.
Yeah. And of course, I believe Michelle Clapton was the designer.
Yeah, Michelle, the Michelle squared, as I kind of call them.
Yeah.
They,
Oh my gosh. They are spelled slightly differently though, aren't? Isn't one without
no, I'm pretty sure they're both
I
with
thought only
one.
one has one L and one has two L's.
No, I think they both. I'm 90% sure they both have
Okay,
one.
you would know.
Because Abby Cox calls them the Michelles with one L's.
That's so funny. Oh, they're both with one L. Okay, I should know that.
Sure. Because my mum is called Michelle as well, and she has two. So I think when I write birthday cards to Carragher, it's with one. I'm pretty. I'm really rubbish about things like that. Because I generally just call her by her last name. I don't know what. It's easier when you're working with two Michelle.
For sure.
It's just easier. But yeah, I got on that and just kind of I was there for 2 weeks. I did virtually nothing. During the time I was there, a big I was cleaning a screen print screen and a pot of green dye powder fell on my head, activated with the water in the room. And I went from pink shirt, pale blue jeans, pink shoes, like very Glinda, to Elphaba in like 10 seconds because it was olive green dye. My entire body and face was covered in green dye, which wasn't my best moment for my first ever professional industry placement. But yeah, so just kind of honestly was just nice and inquisitive and, as nice as you can be as a human. So just was inquisitive and eager to learn and put myself out to go the extra mile to help with things. And then, I made everyone goodbye cards when I left. I illustrated everyone's separate cards that were like pencil sketches of like flowers and birds and Celtic standing stones that was kind of inspired by the secret garden that we were on, like gates with ivy round. Like everyone had a different one.
Oh my gosh, Cassie, way to make an impression on everyone.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. I think a small gift goes a long way.
Absolutely.
I learned. So I did that, and then I don't remember. And then Michelle brought me in on the Nevers to help her. I
haven't seen that show, but my husband loved it. I mean, I've seen some of the designs. Just beautiful.
The designs are exquisite. Like easily one of my favorite things I've ever worked on, just from the aesthetic point, because I love the 1890s and everything was just beautiful. Like all the fabric virtually was custom dyed, and it was just stunning. So yeah, I got to do one capelet for Lavinia and some appliques for a bodice for a second dress for Lavinia. And then COVID literally happened and shut production down. And, I remember like 2 days before England was locked down, I literally was up in London giving a bodice in. And a friend of mine, Claire, who's an incredible cutter, we were both the last two people handing stuff in. And I quite like Hamilton. That's one of my favorite musicals.
Oh yeah.
So I handed the costume over and I said, "Oh, I'll see you on the other side of the war," as like a silly Hamilton reference, very tongue in cheek, because I was like, "Oh, it'll be over in 2 weeks," and then.
Oh gosh, yeah. I totally.
So and then COVID happened, and then kind of did other jobs with other people, and then. Season 2 of the Nevers, Peripheral happened, and
I did watch that. Now, was there any embroidery in that show?
There was a lot. Yeah,
really?
It was. Yeah, to be fair, a lot of what I did was mainly crowd and creating kind of this cool deconstructed fashion vibe. A lot of the pieces I did specifically were in like one scene at a party. And a lot of it was in the background, and there was so much detail in some of those costumes. It was crazy. And then the main pieces I did a bit for Ossian. He had a coat which I embroidered just white sort of running stitch that sort of faded away up the back. He had sort of pleats in a sunray up the back, which I top stitched. Flynn had some shoes that had like an Aztec-y, almost Native American kind of graphic on the top. They were like a suede slip-on moccasin, and I embroidered that on tulle and we glued it on, which I don't think you saw. And then Alita had a few jackets that had like, basically we had a weaver called Verity Finney Green, who is incredible, who wove a lot of fabric custom that was kind of reptilian and like latex and metal and paper yarn and different weird combinations of things that made these awesome custom fabrics. So a lot of things that Michelle wanted was the idea that things were in that weren't seamed together. So a lot of what I did was like a garment was given to me with the seams, of course, and then they wanted me to find threads that were similar to the yarn or the yarn and embroider over the seam into the fabric so it looked like a seamless thing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, sure.
Yeah, so there were a few pieces like that you don't notice it's embroidered because it's not meant to be.
Wow, that's really fascinating, though. I love that.
There were some cool things like that, and then and then there was one waistcoat I did for a robot waiter that had like some Victorian frogging on, that I don't even remember seeing in the show when I watched it. I think it might have been in the bar.
Is that show coming back though? Like I know the Nevers isn't coming back, but is Peripheral coming back? Do you know?
I don't think it is.
Oh, that's what a shame.
Yeah, it was good.
Because that's like Lisa. I think that's Lisa Joy, isn't it? And the other Nolan.
Yes, it was really interesting. I mean, I must admit, when we were working on it, we were always like, "Wait, what's happening? What's the
no, it was really cool. It was really cool.
Is it time travel? Is it a video game? The whole time we were like, I don't know. But
I sometimes would have to turn to my husband and go, "What's going on here?" Like he'd have to explain. He's very good with that stuff, though. He's very good. He was supposed to mansplain to me, but I'm asking him, so it's not mansplaining.
That's fair. But yeah, we were on the Peripheral, and then I think Michelle was just happy with everything and wanted another embroiderer on the Nevers. So as soon as I finished Peripheral, like as soon as I immediately just went to the Nevers. Like no break, like a lot of us did, because we were on. Michelle likes designers often use the same people for a lot of things. So basically, when someone finished on the Peripheral, you'd then see them on the Nevers. Both teams were fabulous, incredible cutters. Michelle always uses incredible cutters. Who just make such wonderful shapes on the stand, and you'll see someone, you'll go over to one of your colleagues and there'll just be a pile of all these fabrics and calico, and you'll just be like, "Oh, what are you up to?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm just kind of playing around with a skirt or something." And then like 2 days later you'll go over and it's like a beautiful partially put together thing, and you're like, "Oh." It's
because when I was looking at stills for the show, and I'm like, if you don't even have to look up who the designer is, it's Michelle. She has
the Nevers or Peripheral or both.
Oh, sorry, Peripheral.
Yes, it's very
even though it's a contemporary show, it's like technically speaking, I suppose it's a contemporary show, but it just has her signature and just the way she likes to, I don't know, manipulate fabric. Or like she just has such an interesting eye, and it's very, very specific to her. So, which is why when I started looking at season 2 of House of the Dragon, I'm like, this is feeling more like Michelle. This is feeling more like something I think she would be like, I'm really proud of this. Like, or I look at this and say yes, because it just has, they've captured that, I think, a bit of her magic that was in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Caroline is fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
She is fabulous. She's very sweet.
I have some questions here. Cassie, can I ask you some questions from the viewers here? Absolutely. So, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge Jackie. Hi, Jackie. She says, very beautiful dress, but she said, how'd you get Alison Hightower? I'm not sure if she means like, did you get that assigned to you? No. Do you want to, because I think she came in late. Did you want to just explain what you're wearing?
Yeah, this dress is kind of trying to give a little of kind of Morgana. It's a little bit of Eleanor of Aquitaine. It's a little bit of Alison Hightower. To be fair, when I look at myself right now, it's giving a bit of Princess Fiona.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think of that because of your red hair.
Which I don't hate. To be honest, nowadays my drag 90% of my life now is a red hair with a shade of green. Like I didn't realize I've just slipped into it, but my Versailles gown was like olive with orange and a ginger hair. My Tudor gown that I wore to the premiere of Mary and George, and I'm currently adding lots more detail and a new skirt and a hat and stuff, is olive green, ivory, gold, and ginger hair again. And then this is, I just like that combo. I think it goes back to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I noticed that even in Damsel, they went with sort of ginger hair ladies, which I was sort of like, it kind of reminded, like when they're in the north, I was like, she's like Sansa Stark. What's going on here? She's Sansa Stark, and then she comes down to the city, and
yeah, it was giving quite a lot of that, wasn't it? It was giving a lot of Game of Thrones references. I think my favorite costume 100% in that movie was that kind of senatory woman who had a kind of circular halo-y kind of headpiece with like a wimple and then like a very column-y dress. It kind of looked like some of the stuff that Padme Amidala was wearing in like
yes.
There was one dress of hers that had that sort of shape with a veil and a down, but I think that was like shades of mauve and dark purple with like gold chains as well on the wimple, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, that was beautiful.
South London reseller, their question is, I was marking some work the other day, and the student mentioned Vera West, who designed the gowns in Bride of Frankenstein, and they ask, who is your favorite costume designer?
Oh, it's hard.
It's a hard one.
It's hard. Michelle Clapton, obviously, bit biased, having worked with her a lot, but she has such an eye for not just fabric and stuff, but using people's talents and designing for people and sort of choosing people to make the best, and encouraging everyone to bring their A game, which is good to be around. Kind of infectious, inspirational energy. I think other people that I'm particularly fond of, Kate Hawley, who did Crimson Peak, is incredible. Milena Canonero is fabulous. A lot of her things. She does a lot of opera and things, which are beautiful. Iko Ashoka is incredible. Like a lot of the costumes. In fact, this wig is very Lucy in the Garden.
By the way, I had the weird so Jeff, I've had him on the show. He does shoes, and he worked with Aiko on Snow White, and he said he had a great experience with her. But then I had another guest on who told me that she was awful. And I was like, really? Oh my God. He worked on Snow White with her, and he said she was a monster. Now, I was pretty shocked about that. And because, Jeff was like, oh, she was so lovely. I mean, she might have even been sick then. I don't know. But it just sounds like they were on different wavelengths.
That does happen with creative people. Like there's people you just don't get along with. Some people's creative temperaments are very big, not just designers, anyone in the creative industry, producers, people in the work crew, makeup people, the egos can sometimes get in the way, and some people just don't click, like for whatever reason.
Absolutely. I mean, Bram Stoker's Dracula is just, for me, like, amazing.
I've wanted Lucy's snake dress forever.
I saw someone make it recently, actually, on Instagram.
I forget. It's one of
I don't know her name.
Someone I talk to a lot. It might be Sola Tido, maybe.
It was beautiful. The one I saw, it was really beautiful.
Yeah, really.
Because it's all embroidered or appliqued, is it?
Yeah, she'd done satin applique with a satin stitch zigzag on the embroidery on a sewing machine to apply them all and outline and inline the snakes. But just like lining it all up must have been hellish. That dress. Snow White is fabulous. I must admit, I don't really love some of the Evil Queen's dresses because I think they veer a little into slightly too camp.
Yeah, that's what Eric was working on, by the way, with Snow White. I mean, they're beautifully made.
For sure. I love Snow White's dress that's like the kind of vaguely 18th century stays with the puff sleeve with the giant saffron yellow cape. That's
amazing. Yeah.
That's stunning costume, and like it frames her like dark hair, pale skin, lips beautifully.
Denise has a question for you. She says they had another question from me. We had a few people say they loved the Nevers, loved the Secret Garden. She says, do you have any tips? This is a great question on how to make costumes already slated for use in warmer, cooler, I think she means climates, when open air schedules don't cooperate with the weather. Do you mean
So
like?
I'm taking these earrings out because the noise they're
Sure.
making is terrible, and the clicking.
Okay, sure. Well, you can't see them anyway because your
But
beautiful auburn hair or ginger hair.
that's
Yeah, sorry. So, Denise, do you mean like clothing that will, or costumes that will feel comfortable in hotter climates? I think that's what she means.
I must admit, this is something I have This is something I have a rocky relationship with because I perform in my costumes, so I lip sync, I move around a lot. I've performed at Prides. I've performed on the hottest day of the British summer one year, which was horrendous. And in peacetime, I sweat like a hooker in church. Like, it is not even funny how much I sweat just sitting here. Like,
I
I'm
love that
sitting here,
metaphor.
and it's disgusting. And I wear period clothes with all the correct underpinnings and sweat through gowns. Like, I will often have visible sweat patches under my arms. It's vile. So I just kind of deal with it. I put as much interfacing in things under the arms, like I cut like a kind of crescent shape, and put that under the armpits of gowns and dress shields. But other ways you can do things to make them cooler, it depends what it is, because if you're trying to replicate a costume like a cosplay, you're kind of married to whatever fabric they used.
I know in theater we use pitch shields.
I use those as much as I can. But
I used to work with this actress years ago. This is in theater, and every night it was an 18th century, or actually no, it was 17th century. And every night I had to take her bodice and I had to turn it inside out and air dry it, and then like wash her pitch shields, because you can't wash the costumes every night, right? So, or clean them, or we'd spray them with vodka or something.
Spray, vodka
yeah,
spray.
Vodka. But some people are genetically like that. They just sweat a lot. But obviously
I just sweat.
Something like linen would breathe nicely, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Linen, I try to use linen as much as possible. Silk, despite being light, silk is the least breathable of the fibers. Like, wool is more breathable than silk. So silk, you are always gonna, if you sweat, you are always gonna get marks in, annoyingly. It's kind of unavoidable. My Versailles gown, I sweated through. My Tudor gown.
Oh, and you can't get that out really after, right? Because if you try to,
I just let it dry. You do end up with a slight stain, but it's like what you do. I'm sure women of the past would have had sweat stains. I kind of don't worry about it. My Tudor bodice I sweated through, and my 1890s Gilded Age kind of dress that I recently made, I sweated through. But there's nothing you can do if you're.
Yes, sorry. Kitty dressed in pink says Luna Rosa costuming. That's who I follow. Yes, she did Lucy's white pink dress too from Dracula. I did see that. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
I talked to most of the kind of costumey, influencey, people, shall we say? And I'm sure I lost track of who it was because there's so many and they're all so brilliant at what they do.
It was funny. I had not funny, but I had Carlos. He's the costume designer for Shogun. Yes. And by the way, he's like the nicest person you could ever meet in the world. Like, he is so sweet. He lives in Italy, or sorry, he lives in France, but he's Spanish. And I asked him about wearing the Shogun outfits. Like I said, they must have been sweating. They must have been like so hot. And he said, no, actually it was so chilly and like, damp that they appreciated it because they were wearing silk. Like, everything was pretty much Japanese silk. And actually I was watching it last night, and I know what he was talking about, because when everyone was talking, you could see the steam coming out of their mouths. So it must have been quite chilly. So that was one time where a warm costume works for you, but something like the Fremen uniform, in Dune, that would be maybe a situation where it would be pretty uncomfortable.
It's a weird one, because oftentimes oftentimes I find that the attitude for like in Game of Thrones when they did like the purple wedding, that was all filmed in like Croatia, and
And it was hot.
most of the guys are wearing like mandarin collared doublets that are like heavy velvet wools, brocades, so I know they were sweating.
Yeah, Charles Dance complained about it. He was, but I mean, he's an older gentleman.
I would
have complained probably.
People would need to. I would need to have an assistant just for me if I was in that show with a hairdryer between, just doing my pits between.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I find that often the attitude is kind of, it'll be fine. They'll go somewhere cool between shots. They'll deal with it. I often find the other way round, where you're doing a costume that's meant to look not there, barely there, sheer, but like something like the Golden Compass movie where Eva Green is wearing that like Grecian chiffon gown and she's in like the actual snow. Like stuff like that I find is more of a talking point when we're having discussions about making and designing stuff. It's like, how do we make them warm in a costume that is inappropriate for that, like in Crimson Peak where they're out fighting and they're just wearing a sheer linen.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I guess between takes they'd have parkas and things. Because actually, I know Crimson Peak was shot in Toronto. Yes. So, but I don't know what time of year that was. So, for sure, like whenever I've been on set, like they always have parkas and stuff like that for the
and warm
talent.
Tents and cool tents.
Yeah. But even like I did an exterior one time and it was so cold. And I remember there was this police officer, and it had been a long day too. And there's a police officer, and I think, like they just hire, they hire police to help with traffic and things like that because we were shooting on the street. And I said something about how my legs were aching, like they were actually aching. And he's like, he kind of made fun of me. And I was just like, sorry, you're like hanging out in the craft services truck. Like, meanwhile, like, because if you're out, especially if you're standing on concrete or, and it's really cold,
you lose all warmth. I remember
you lose all warmth. Yeah.
I don't tend to go on set. I live in the studios, but for my first couple of jobs, I did some set. And I remember one thing, it was a grad film. It wasn't like a professional film. And it was about kind of, at that time in the UK, and certainly where we were, there was a lot of horrible British nationalism and like hating on immigrants and immigration. So the film was about a pair of Russian students who get attacked by some sort of white British people. And we were shooting a scene where the young man and young woman are walking along the beach and these guys attack, and sort of, it was the fight scene. Well, not fight, attack scene. And they sort of kick the guy into the sand and chuck him in the sea, and it was a whole thing. And it was so cold. It was like November in England. So it was like 0, -1, -2. And I was all wrapped up in like 3 jumpers. And we'd been on set since like 5:30 in the morning. And it was so cold. And the wind chill from the sea was so intense. And
that's the other thing, the wind chill, right?
Yeah, and the poor actor we were huddled behind like sand dunes, like, in giant coats. And then the poor actors were literally wearing hoodies and a sports coat. And then one of them was in like a jacket and a thin parka and literally gets thrown in the sea. And we were like, he's going to die. He's going to die.
Yeah, because once you lose that body heat, like it's hard to get it back. Like if you get thrown into the water. By the way, I was going to tell you, I went to Niagara Falls a few weeks ago with my family, and it was really great because they had this like outdoor pool in Canada, but it was heated. So you could go into the pool, like you have to go outside for a minute, and then you can go in this nice warm pool, and then you sit and you've got the cold air. So it was actually, I was like, this is a very Canadian moment.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, to be fair, we have a hot tub at home, and I like using it the most in the winter when your face is ice cold, but your body.
It feels so good. Yeah.
It's such a vibe.
And I want to say hello to my friend Alicia. Hi, Alicia. She's here. How are you? anyway, so we're having so much fun with Cassie right now, chatting about all kinds of things. And Alicia's doing my Shogun breakdowns with me. So we were talking about having Cassie come on the Game of Queens show when we start doing House of the Dragon, and she's already like sort of dressed like Allison, but she's sort of an amalgamation of. I have to say, by the way, just on as a side note, I kind of am appreciating. I think you mentioned this earlier. Like when I did my review of the trailer and some of the posters, I am kind of like, I'm not either side, but costume wise, I'm kind of leaning to the greens, kind of leaning to the green costume wise. What about you?
It's hard because my favorite color in the world is green, especially like yellow toned green is my fave. Like anything olivey, anything cat's eye green, anything khaki. Like that sort of like
Helena has a really nice sort of mossy green colored gown.
Yeah, that
I kind of appreciated.
That is beautiful. That one. The embroidery on that is beautiful, but I can't say too much.
But Allison has many. You know, we were saying she's kind of almost got the blue teal green, and then she's got the forest green, and she's got the emerald green, and
there were lots of shades. I think Caroline was quite intent on it not all being the exact same shade of green, just so it didn't look, you know, flat. And it can look very much like they are only wearing their exact house color, and you know, it you know, but it was beautiful. All the fabrics for season 2 were absolutely stunning. I think it's a hard one because shape wise, I think I would have to, if it was me, if I was in that world, which I'm glad I'm not, because I would just overshare my hand and just end up in a noose or on a block or.
I would have been dead. Yeah, for sure.
In like 5 minutes, like genuinely. I think I like the shape of the reds more, with the kind of, you know, the cobra-y hood sort of sleeves and the kind of the cutaways and the mandarin collars, but the color palette of the decoration from the green, like the golds and the olivey greens, and you know, that's more my vibe.
Again, that sort of cobra hood though is very Michelle. That was her. That's all her.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
She said, I have this, like, I always go back to this in my notes, that Danny was inspired by the cobra. That's exactly what she said. And so she's got this sort of like strong shoulder, and you know, that shows strength. She always talked about the strength of her shoulders. So, and then you see it with Viserys, and you see it with Rhaegar as well.
Yeah, that just became that Targaryen look, like that was what
she's established it. She made it.
This sort of vaguely every part of their costumes kind of references snakes and reptiles, and then I think a lot of the green side from season 1 as well is more probably influenced more by the High Tower, and it's, you know, quite, you know, almost some of it, almost especially in season 1, it almost looked like crenellations on a tower, like around a neckline, and you know, things that made it look almost architectural.
For sure, yeah. And I was saying yesterday or the other day in my video that I was even seeing some relationships between, you know, obviously we can talk more about Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon on another stream, but between the Tyrells, and I mean, you know, you've got the green and the gold, obviously, but I felt like there was a little bit of a synergy there, and between
the High Towers and the Tyrells, you mean?
And Tyrells, yeah. I was looking at some of the embroideries and things like that. So one of the embroideries, and you're not allowed to speak to this maybe later, but I felt like the embroidery on Alicent's one gown, it looks kind of like a spider web, like cobweb like. It's the one that she's on the poster, not the close-up on the poster, like the one that you worked on. Yes.
That gown is literally exquisite. Like, so incredible. I did a tiny bit of applying bits and some beading and a tiny bit on that dress, but there were like 3 people working on that dress because it's so heavy coverage.
Hi, Justin.
and it's really beautiful. It's
I
more.
can't wait. I can't wait to see everything in the show. Like, you know, because right
Yes,
now it's like, oh, you see it. Like, I don't like, that's one oftentimes why I don't like to do an analysis of the posters. But, you know, people are like, well, you know, what do you
I
think?
must admit, all the cosplayers are like instantly rushing to start making stuff and trying to find fabric, and I'm like, you don't know, you have no idea what it looks like from the grade. And
Absolutely.
I've been commenting in a few of the big cosplayers like, oh, this fabric is going to be difficult. And I'm like, it's really funny because I know where that fabric is from and you're never going to ever be able to get it. So sorry
Yeah,
about
like
it.
the one that like Allison's scaly fabric, you probably can't tell me, but I
Alice
felt that was
or Rhaenyra.
woven. Sorry, Rhaenyra's
Yeah,
black scaly fabric. That looked like to me that it might have been custom woven.
I will say, I think percentage wise, I think quite a lot was custom pleated, custom woven, custom dyed. Especially like the linings, because there's like a lot of linings that have like the actual sigils woven in like a brocade.
Yeah, I know some of the like for season 1, because they told me. I know Top Fabric Soho had woven. I mean, I don't think it's a secret because she told me last season that they wove some of the brocades custom for the show. So like Rhaenyra's coronation gown, or you know, fealty gown or whatever you want to call it, her cloak, and then I think Viserys's he has I think a cloak that was lined with it, like in red though.
Yeah,
and
there was a red and a black in the work.
And I think young Allison, her wedding gown, I think also might have had it, but it got cut. So I saw it in so anyway, they did tell me some of the fabrics, but
yeah, I think the one that everyone is really excited about, specifically for Rhaenyra, was like quilted. It's not like a weave, it's like a quilt. It's like quilted. So
is that the black one that she's wearing on the poster? That it looks like, I was saying, it looks like she's been dipped in dragon scale. She just looks like she's been dipped and then pulled out. Like
that one,
you know,
it's like
so clingy to her. Like it's just beautiful. Like I could you have to really zoom in to see the seams, because one of my issues I had last season was some of the weird darts and dents and weird things.
The cutting for this season is like very sprayed to the body, beautifully.
Amazing.
Like
Denise has another question for you. I have Denise, I'm going to do your question if that's okay with Cassie, and then I have a question from one of my patrons if that's okay.
Absolutely.
She says, do you ever have to work with jewelers or the armory while finishing costumes, or is everything working together as sussed out before things get to stitching?
It's a very collaborative process, and some costumes are very thought through and we know exactly who's doing what and when. But sometimes costumes are added or taken away, or a design will be changed last minute because the actor doesn't like how heavy something is, or they're going to play the character in a different way to the designer envisioned, or just changes. It's such a changing process. You can't sort of concrete anything until it's basically on set. So sometimes we are very like talking to the makers, we generally speak to the makers always, the cutter and the makers for a costume. That's who our closest relationship is to. But sometimes we do speak to headdress people. Like for House of the Dragon, there were some times where they were like, oh, we need some beads or an edging for a veil, and they'd come to us and we'd see what we had and, you know, suggest things. The jewelry for House of the Dragon was very much kind of its own thing, so we didn't kind of have to deal. In fact, actually, no, we did. I didn't, but there was like a few pendants and brooches that were going to be a focus for a bodice, which had to be kind of worked around. Yeah, in fact, there was some beautiful custom jewelry pieces, like 7-pointed stars and stuff.
Like on Allison, like her
kind of. There was a lot for crowd, but yeah, there were some.
Okay, yeah.
There were some lovely pieces with like opals and stuff.
I actually interviewed Jessica Delot. She did like the ring, some of the signet rings that were worn by Daemon and Viserys and Corlys as well. And she did some, so she did some jewelry. So she's actually selling her collection. Like she's super smart,
Oh,
by
I've
the
seen
way.
it. I've seen it. Yes.
Super
Yeah.
smart, by the way, to do a license agreement with
Yeah, I
them, I
don't know
have to
how she
say.
managed. I don't know how she would have managed that. That would have been a really
I don't
difficult
know, but
contract.
I was like, because I know, so for instance, Michelle Carragher has her MUI collection, so she was able to work that out. I know, well, and Michelle Carragher was able to do her book and, so they obviously were able to work out some things, but usually like, the designer doesn't get anything. They get, they get squat.
I have no idea how they wrangled that. That must have been like basically a condition of them accepting the job in the first place. It must have been literally like, this is what I want to do.
You have to, you have to negotiate it at the time because
That must have been crazy.
And with Jessica, she had worked on a couple of bigger films already. So maybe because she had already had that sort of, acumen or, history, maybe she's very savvy, very smart. I was like, kudos to you on that.
Yeah, I suppose also because it's they're probably less finicky because it's a piece of jewelry rather than a whole dress. Like a ring, you're not going to see that much. So I imagine that was easier to negotiate, probably.
Mm-hmm. But Damon in the new poster, he's holding his sword, and you can see the ring like right there. So I was like, he has his 2 rings. So I'm like, good for you, girl.
Yeah,
I was really happy for it, and she's a lovely person too. She's really nice. So you're always happy when nice people get nice things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I have a question from one of my patrons, and so she actually has 2 questions for you. So the first one is, what basic tools would you recommend to a beginner or person interested in tambour embroidery? And you probably have to define that for everyone, to get to make pieces for costumes or cosplay.
Well, tambour embroidery is a technique. I believe it's Indian. I believe, and it involves kind of framing. I don't really do virtually any of it, if I'm honest. I find they tend to use it a lot in Broadway costumes and opera.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
I don't know why, really. I think it's because it's easier to repeat things on the scale. I know they use tambour for virtually everything for the Wicked costumes. For
the Broadway show or for the new movie?
Yeah, okay. For Broadway, yeah. All of Madame Morrible's stuff is like tamboured with like alchemical runes and things. And I think a lot of Glinda's sort of swirly twirly embroidery is tambour. It's basically a big frame, and you're kind of working under as well as over at the same time. And
like on a table? Is it sort of on a table?
It's kind of like a giant frame that the fabric is stretched over with legs, like a big table that's like got no top, if you like, and the fabric is stretched over it. And yeah, you use kind of like what you use to knot hair in wig lace, and you you kind of use this almost hook type tool, and you kind of chain stitch, kind of knot. It's kind of somewhere between embroidery and crochet and wig knotting. It's an odd process that I don't love. But yeah, tool wise, you just need decent stuff to start with. Like any embroidery, as much as obviously it's tempting to just buy cheaper things, you just have a better time when something is a quality material to start with. Yeah, I would definitely just invest. A good frame is really important, like the stretcher frame, because if the tension goes, that's when you end up with wobbly fabric. So I think the frame is the most important bit.
Yeah. But do you think that, like, I mean, I'm assuming she must have some kind of experience if she's doing that, but that wouldn't be where you would start though. Like if you were like, hey, I want to start embroidery, what would you start with? Like doing samplers or something?
Yeah,
or what would you be
Christ, I would not start with tambour. I mean, it's not that it's necessarily complex, it's just counterintuitive to how most embroidery is done. I think if people are starting with embroidery, the first thing to do is to do one piece that is something that you really are passionate about, like either a whole costume or just a thing. Like I embroider an awful lot of insects and birds. They're kind of my favorite things to embroider, and my style tends towards sharper, more angular, like thorns as opposed to vines, So, I embroider when I'm just not doing anything, a lot of just insect forms. So I think, yeah, just get a small frame and just some heat dissolvable pens and some threads and just say, oh, what am I passionate about? Oh, I love seashells, embroider a seashell, or, just treat it like a still life painting, just do something that you're passionate about. Even if it's like, even if you like, if you're someone who's really into calligraphy and font, like embroider the label of a food you like or something, like just get your eye in.
Would you recommend getting a kit to start, or would you recommend like just watching a YouTube video on how to get started, or what are your
some kits that are made up by, like, you can often embroiderers who like have Instagram pages with followings or cosplayers. Amazonian Cosplay actually does really lovely beginner embroidery kits that have quality materials and are a nice thing. She does a pomegranate kit, which is really beautiful. It's like a still life pomegranates with like beaded centers. They're beautiful. So I'd look for that as opposed to like in a Hobby Lobby or craft shop, which will be like embroider a rainbow, and it will be very, very basic materials, and it will be a bit bland and sad. So I would invest in something you want to do. YouTube tutorials are great. In fact, actually, a very good book, I forget who the author is, but she has a series, and one of them is called like Shakespeare's Flowers, and then there's a stump work, beetle, and butterfly one. And they're like a hardback book, which is a step-by-step tutorial for how to do things, and they're really inspiring. She's got like 9 or 10 books. I forget what the author's name is, though.
Wonderful. And of course, Michelle has a book. Michelle
and Carragher has a book, yeah. But that one, her book is a beautiful sort of inspiration. There's like tricks and like how she does things and sources, but it's less like a step-by-step than this one book series. I forget that if I sort of was in a rooting around mood, I'd be able to find it. It's over there somewhere, but
you can let me, if you remember later, you can let me know and I'll put it in the description below.
I know that one of her books, I know that one of her books is specifically the one I love, is the beetle one, and it's like embroidered beetles, and they are really, really, really lovely books.
Yeah, Michelle also does, at least in Game of Thrones, she did a lot of butterflies and beetles and insects.
Yes,
birds. So again, that must have been when you saw some of her work, you must have just been like, especially the ones like, so the ones that actually have the wings coming out, like, is that stump work? Like, yes.
The Carth ones are like beautiful 3D, almost like clockwork pieces that Michelle whips up out of like tubular wire and wires.
Okay.
Different things. They're like, she kind of will embroider, like, she'll break down the insect into all of its bits, like wings, thorax, carapace, head, legs, embroider them all on separate bits of organza, wire the edges, and then kind of bend them around themselves, stitch them together to make like a 3-dimensional thing. So it is stump work, but it's kind of a bit more mixed media, I'd say. Like there's often leather involved or wire or mother
and did she do any did she do any painting on top of it, or is that does she just do everything with beading?
No, Michelle does like to, if something's looking too bright, she'll say, oh, that looks a bit bright, oh, I need to knock that back, and she'll acrylic paint, or I've been on things where we've had to do something quickly, and the only sort of way and the best way to do it was like an alcohol marker to like change the color of a thread a bit, or like a Sharpie pen. Like on Silo season 2 that I was just on, there were a couple of beads for one costume that we couldn't get the shade I wanted, so in the end I just colored them in with a brown Sharpie and just hope for that. Hope for the best.
Yeah, no, I've been there. I have another question for you. I'm not going to keep you much longer because it's much later for you there. You're in where you are. So the question is, how do you build the confidence? This is a great question to show or talk about your work to people within the movie theater business to make connections and network. That's a really great question.
To be honest, I don't really think I've ever had to build confidence for that, because when you're in a workroom, my family are quite athletic-y, sciencey, general knowledge-y people. So when I'm with them, they don't get a lot of my interests, that kind of thing.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you're in a workroom, you're in a room full of people who are doing a job because of the same reasons you are. They're doing it because they love historical costume, or they love embellishment, or they love whatever they're doing. So I've never had to sort of pluck up confidence, if you like, because everyone is already willing to talk about that. Everyone is already always excited to see what everyone else makes, and look at each other's pictures on phones and be like, oh, how did you do that, for like tricks of how to pick things up. Some of the skills that I use that are my go-to skills are things I've picked up by watching makers put things together, and be like, oh, out of interest, how did you gather that much awkward fabric into that smaller spot? And it's, oh, run 3 lines of thread through rather than 1 or 2. It's all that kind of thing. So I've never had to pluck up courage, if you like, because everyone is already willing to talk about it. It can be intimidating talking to like a big designer or a supervisor or someone you idolize, for sure. But they're still the same. They're doing a job because they're passionate about it. So if you show someone your genuine passion, I find that's the way to go, rather than worry about professionalism. If you're honest about how excited you are about something, I think that tends to break the ice better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you like we had a panel on at one point, and we had different people on the panel. Like we had a person who did breakdown, and we had a person who was a buyer, and I think we had who else did we have? We had Jeff who does shoes, and people were talking about like have like kind of working on your skills like all the time, and having your, I don't know, if you're on Instagram, for instance, you could have like, here's my work. So what do you think about that? Like constantly sort of honing and work. One of the things that was really interesting that came out of it was that some people were saying there's some people who spend all their time on Instagram, just sort of like doing Instagram, but they're not really working on, we had a concept artist. This was the person who was speaking on this, because she was quite young, but doing very, very well as a concept artist, a costume concept artist, I should say. And she's like, I'm always working on my craft. I'm always working on, so what do you think about that idea of just like, do you think you should be on Instagram sharing your work? Do you think you should just have a portfolio that's available if somebody asks for it? Like, what are your thoughts on all that?
I'm in 2 camps about that, because I am always making something costume wise, like literally always. Like I get very bored.
Sorry, Cassie, I have to say, speaking of that, before you finish up, Cassie has the most amazing Instagram account. The things on there are just mind blowing. So I would highly, highly recommend. I have it in the chat, or sorry, in the description. So I would really appreciate all of you going over there and checking it out and following her if you like it. Sorry, Sorry, Cassie, go ahead.
But yeah,
it's brilliant.
I'm always making something. I get very bored very quickly. If I've just finished an 18th century dress and I'm looking at the photos of me in it, I'm like, oh, that was fun. Now I want to make a Tudor thing. And then I'll finish that, and then I'll be like, oh, I'll be halfway through it, and then I'll be like, oh, I'm getting a bit bored of this. And then I'll watch something medieval and be like, oh, I want to make that. I've just made 4 costumes that are for a LARP I'm going to, out of drag, but still fancy costume, that are very very Game of Thrones kind of power energy. Lots of robes and layered tunics that are very Asian sort of inspired, kind of like a gi kind of shape. So that's been fun, doing the 4 different fantasy things, and a commission as well, so 5 different fantasy things. But now I'm kind of itching to get into Tudor, and also a little bit of like modern women's tailoring, I would definitely say it's so important to try different skills. Like, make yourself do stuff. Like, drag for me is a good outlet because I'll say, oh, I need to make the dress, but I also need to make the corset. I need to make the hat. I need to make the jewelry. Like, all of my jewelry is custom by me. Like these, my
You're doing
earrings.
the full pack. You're doing the full package.
Yeah, all the breakdown. Like, these earrings are like custom little.
Oh, here, let me focus on you there.
The little
Oh my
beetles.
gosh.
So they're all custom with beetle.
And that looks like an insect bug there that you have on the.
Yeah, it is. It's a little sort of
Oh, it's so
scarab
cute.
with like a petrel, and he's got a little skull kind of.
It's really pretty. I like the colors.
Yeah, I use beetles a lot in my drag as a thing. Always learn skills, especially at work, like, because then they're useful for work, and you can combine the skills, but also you've got another skill. So sometimes I've been on something, and then I do calligraphy and stuff in my off time, and I bookbind and do different things. So like all of these skills will come in handy. Or you'll be bookbinding and you'll be like, oh, I use this kind of way to make an edge of leather around a piece of wood, and then you'll be doing a costume with leather around a piece of buckram, and you'll be like, oh, I already know
I can use that
to do that join. You know, Instagram is a funny place, especially at the minute with not getting kind of the traffic that we used to. Sometimes, I mean, my friend went to Versailles with me, and she had like 200 followers the first year she went. She made the red dress from Outlander and then came back with like 12,000 after she'd posted some of her things. So she went to Versailles with me this year with 12,000, and she wore the wedding dress from Outlander that she'd made, and it was incredible. And then now has like 59,000 or 58. Like, sometimes things can just go crazy. Sometimes they don't. I've been working at it for years and I'm still at like 8,500. Sometimes stuff just vibes with people. I definitely say work on skills and show off as much as you're comfy to, because some people get really weird about sharing things online. I've personally never been bothered about that.
Yeah, I know a maker who's like that, and she doesn't like. I would have I'd have somebody ask me a question about a costume, like a Jon Snow costume or something, and I would ask them, and they would say, I don't want to share that because that's what I do for a living. And I've never been like that ever.
I think that's I don't like that, like a magician never reveals his secrets thing. That's very elitist to me. That gets like that rubs me the sort of way of like, I get that we're all competing for jobs and stuff, but there is kind of room for all of us. Everyone does have something different to bring, and especially with older people, in the nicest way possible. Those people are not going to be around forever. So why would you not want to pass the knowledge down? The knowledge dies with you then if you're not sharing anything. I think that's the stupidest thing ever.
Tony's here. Hi, Tony. That's a great answer, by the way. He says, is it harder making costumes or doing makeup? Yes, because we haven't talked about your makeup. Assuming you did your own makeup, it is amazingly applied. Oh, thanks, Tony. Tony is like, by the way, he's a wonderful creator. He has his own channel on YouTube as well. So, did you want to talk a little bit about your makeup? We didn't even get into that.
Yeah, we can. My makeup is, my kind of eye shape is very much, God, my crown has gone like Joffrey Baratheon. It's like all over the place.
Wonky.
Yeah,
off
there we
to
go.
the side.
My makeup was a real journey figuring out my face, because I haven't got a soft face. I've got quite a prominent Tudorish nose. My lips are quite small, so figuring out the visual illusion for my face and the tricks to make it softer or more terrifying, because if you look at my Instagram, I don't always look soft. Sometimes I look like a haggard swamp witch. Sometimes I look like a vampire. Sometimes I look like a ghost or a zombie. Sometimes I look sexy and futuristic and fashion forward. So it's just figuring out shapes. I tend to always do the same eye shape. I tend to do this kind of Queen Elizabeth portrait, kind of Winnie Sanderson circle, whereas most drag queens do a thinner, narrower cat eye. But I like the sides of my nose to go into my eye, and it sort of widens my eye up. I prefer that sort of Disney villain.
And you've
Shape.
got like naturally sort of green eyes as well, so it sort of works really nicely with your green. And you've got sort of an almond shape, I think. That's what I would call it, like an almond shape.
Yeah, I must admit I'm quite lucky with my eyes in that they do take a cat eye wing, and you know they suit a lot of shapes. My eyebrows, I shave those in half, so I draw it slightly higher, but the front of the brow is my own.
Do you I've seen this done. Do you use like I've seen this technique where they put like a card on and then they sort of like, do you do it and then you stamp it on, or how do you do the eyebrows? I'll have to get you to teach me how to do it.
Oh no,
because I have no eyebrows. My eyebrows are like nothing.
No, for eyebrows, I always draw the under first. I kind of block in. I do a lot. I use an eyebrow pencil to get the shape and then fill them in with eyeshadow. Particularly, you can't get various shades of ginger eyebrow pencil easily, so I use 2 shades of brown and then fill in with an eyeshadow. But I always do this line first, the under one, and then the top. So I block in just the top to get them even. And then the outers, I start with the upper line, draw a line, create that, and then connect it at the bottom. And then just tidy it up if it's not gone how I want with my white, which cuts around it.
Oh, okay. How long does it take you to do your makeup?
It depends on the thing. Like, if you see my Instagram, there's like a ghostly bride look that was inspired by the Ghost Bride from the Haunted Mansion. That had like a skeletal chest piece and was all very pale and grey contour and very intense. There's a vampire that's sort of a Buffy vampire that's all contour. When I do Chucky from Child's Play, that takes quite a while.
That's amazing.
Because of all the scars, that takes quite a while. This makeup is my go-to drag face. A red lip, a lot of blush, this eye, this shaped brow. A small eyelash, not very much wing. That's my go-to. Sometimes there's a gold on the lid.
And you do like highlights and low lights a little bit too, like on your chin and on your forehead and everything. You do that.
Yeah,
and a bit of blush.
Most drag queens do a triangle of white.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of here and including the nose, but I don't like that. I looked at portraits from sort of the 18th century, and I put my highlight in a circle around my sort of, like this, and then we call it in the drag community the brown rainbow for your forehead. So it's like a dark brown into the white.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've always highlighted my chin. I don't know why. I
love it. Jackie has a question. She asks, like, do you ever sell your work? Great question.
I do commissions through my Instagram mainly. I've just done a load for this LARP thing. For commissions for like overseas people, I prefer doing smaller things because I don't have to worry about the fit. I'll do like small embroidery pieces, earrings, that kind of thing. Headpieces I do quite a lot of. But yeah, with the kind of cost of living crisis as it is, not a lot of people have been going mad for things. But I do know a lot of people who do make a lot of money on historical reenactment commissions and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Well, and also, have you ever thought about starting a YouTube channel? You would do really well.
I did have one years ago. Well, not years and years, probably like start of COVID, and it was kind of like a mix of like funny skits and then like retelling history, like macabre kind of witch trials-y type history. So it didn't go anywhere. I wasn't expecting instant success, don't get me wrong, but I was a bit like just disappointed with it. And as a content creator, I enjoy making the content a lot, but like remembering to film stuff and make progress videos and all of that, I find really stressful and annoying, and it like takes away of the flow of making the thing for me. So there's things I know I should be doing better with my socials, but well,
if you ever want any help, let me know and I will.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, because I think you would do really well, and people love that stuff. Like they love it. Cosplay on YouTube is really huge.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and
do more. I'm starting to do more on my TikTok. I've got
good. Okay.
For the LARP costumes, I've been doing progress for those throughout, and I've done some tutorials for like how to do ice dye, how to dye fabric generally, like on a budget. I've done like how to do some leather 3-dimensional armor and that kind of thing. Some of them are posted, some of them are in progress because I'm waiting for the actual event where we're in costume, surrounded by people in costume, to get the final like bit for the videos. But I am slowly sort of doing more of that kind of content.
Now, and I know you go to events too sometimes dressed up. What kind of it? Like I know you went to. I think you went to like a showing of a new show that looks really good, by the way. So, do you get invited to different events like that? Do you get paid when you get to go? Like, or are you going just as a guest, or what? How does that work? Or for free food?
I wish I got to do more. That was sort of my first one. For Mary and George, which was incredible.
Oh, Mary and George. Yeah, that show looks so good.
And yeah, it is incredible. I've watched it, and I literally made a bodice in like 2 days because I got the call and was like, I need to look incredible. So I made a bodice in like literally 2.5 days, if that. Like I got the call at like,
bye, Carl. Thank you.
At like 9:30 at night, and started cutting it at like 10, and was just like on the floor like cutting out toiles. So yeah, that was fabulous. That I didn't get paid for. That was just like free drinks, free food, which was incredible. Don't get me wrong. Like, you do not know food and drinks, especially cocktails and champagne, until you've been to a red carpet after party. Like, it is incredible.
Oh, it was gorgeous. That was a huge. I went 2 years ago. I went to an Austin Powers party. It was like, when Austin. So much fun. Like, yeah, it's I probably now I wouldn't be as into it, but you know, when you're younger, you're like, oh my gosh, free food, free drinks, amazing.
It was. I mean, a friend of mine who is a big cosplayer, who did an incredible Sansa Stark, like, and did metal work for the coronation bod. She made the coronation dress, won a load of cosplay awards. She made like the bodice from metal, like every.
Oh, sorry, what's her name? I think I know her.
Amazonian cosplay.
Yes.
Fabulous. Yeah. She was at the Rings of Power premiere last year and the House of the Dragon one, and she was like, "Oh, I'll bring you to the House of the Dragon one this year," and I was like, "Oh, that'd be cool because I worked on it, etc." But I think she's away when that's happening now, so I don't think that will happen. But I would have loved to have. The one I'm dying to get on is the Bridgerton one, because I have so many dresses that are more 18th century, but Queen Charlotte in that way is 18th century, so I think you get away with it. But
yes, absolutely. Because it was weird because even, I don't know if you've watched, did I ask you what you thought of the Gilded Age? Did I ask you?
No. Gilded Age,
because there's a little bit one of the characters, she kind of does a bit of 18th century, but it's like,
yeah, it's a costume party, isn't it, that scene?
There is, but she even has like some of her silhouettes almost have a bit of an 18th century silhouette.
Yeah, the Gilded Age, I love 1890. Anything between like 1880 and sort of 1910 is one of my favorite periods ever. So I did like quite, I think the costumes of the old money people, particularly Christine Baranski's dress, I was very into. Her color palette, I was very into the jewel tones, and then her sister Ada had the lovely sort of autumny plaids and things, which were beautiful and
and kind of a little bit more masculine. A lot of her silhouettes are sort of like more
I enjoyed that a lot. I did not like a lot of
Bertha.
Yeah, I did not like a lot of her.
I think season 2 is better. Like I was mentioning, I interviewed Eric, who cut a lot of the costumes for the show. And
the cut is always exquisite.
Yeah, I promised. He asked me to behave myself.
Yeah, sometimes it's just color and fabric.
But yeah, some of the fabrics for me were a little bit synthetic looking, and you were saying that, right? They just don't behave the same way as a natural fabric.
There was like 2 costumes in the Gilded Age that were Bertha and that made me genuinely be like, oh, I want that. Bertha has an opera cape at one point that's like red and like floor length velvet, and it's embroidered with like diamonds. That was incredible. And then the one dress that I would wear in like 10 seconds, not even, was the dress that Taysa Farmiga's character, her daughter, wears in season 2. That purple one with the like giant, like weird kind of like almost segmented caterpillar-y like train. That was incredible.
They like kind of like they took the tool and they kind of like, you know, gathered
Bunched
it. But I wasn't crazy about her cloak.
No, I did
I
not
would have
like.
liked to have seen a different cloak.
I did not like that weird, like seamed in, like tabard.
It was like a tabard, yeah.
I didn't like that shape. I didn't like. I also thought that the fabric that Bertha was wearing, that was inspired by that House of Worth gown, the sort of ironmongery one.
Yes.
That didn't look great to me. They'd clearly had that printed. Custom.
They need to get Michelle's print. They need to get Michelle's person. They need to get her weaver.
Either a weaver or I think
because
that would have fabric.
Well, I think that would have been flocked, right? Wouldn't that have been like a velvet flock of some kind? There's a name for it. I think it's like satin with a velvet on top of it.
My friend Carrie, who is an incredible cutter and does a lot of historical reenactment herself and makes for that community, is always telling me that a lot of the Worth gowns were custom woven, like to the piece that they were cutting. So I don't know if that gown would be a situation of a satin weave with a woven bobblier kind of silk weave on the same thing with a different yarn, or I felt like that gown was a sort of velvet applique flock, but I might be wrong. Because there's another one that's like an acid green with a peacock blue velvet. That's more.
Yeah, the designer shared pieces. She shared the segments because, like I think, like you were saying, they had them woven as those segments before they sewed it together, and it definitely looked just like satin. Like the whole thing was satin. And then she had the cloak that matched, which made me go, which was the same, which drew even more attention to it. You know.
I think I would have been very into it because I love that dress. So I love an homage.
Me too.
I'd have been very into it if it wasn't a Duchess satin, if it was like a matte taffeta that was printed with a screen print rather than a digital print. That was easily a digital print. You could tell by the fact that the fabric itself was the same texture. It's the same sort of stuff you see on like Spoonflower.
Yes.
It was that was a digiprint, which bothered me. I think that dress that. What's the sort of secretary friend called?
Oh, Peggy.
Peggy. Her ball gown with the butterflies, which I didn't love. That was very clearly digitally printed.
Yeah, I mean, they did put a bit of tulle over top to try to hide it a bit, but yeah, it's hard. Like they're using modern techniques, right?
Yeah, I really didn't like that dress at all. The composition of the they were again referencing House of Worth, that pale blue one with the like ivory butterflies.
Yeah.
And the composition was like weird, and the butterflies were too big and the colors were too acidy, neon-y for me. I didn't love that dress. I really didn't love that dress.
Well, it was funny because Eric showed me one dress that was worn by Marion, and it was yellow, like a pale yellow though. And the fabric, that one was printed, and it looked nice though. Like I was like, oh, that actually looks really, really good. So I think, but it didn't look like it was a satin. It looked like it might have been like a Georgette or just something a little bit more. So it made a difference.
The digital print is shiny. It just looks like when you get like a Halloween costume in a bag from like Spirit, and it's got all of the like the characters like if you bought like Stephen King's it will have like the pom-poms printed, and when you move the light will hit the print in the same way. It doesn't do it for me. You need that texture.
Yeah.
That like variation.
Bagged costumes were not allowed in our house when I was growing up.
No, although saying that,
I'm like, I can just pop out to the store, Mom. No, Dad had to make it, or my mom had to make it, or.
I must admit, I hate them, and it stresses me out so much that they're so synthetic when children are around candles.
Oh yeah, Halloween. They're probably flammable.
It stresses me out so much. However, I also contributed to the problem massively because for like 3 years of my life, one of my jobs was I was designing for a Taiwanese Halloween costume company that was making
Really?
that was like, you know, they'd say to me, "Oh, we need a few new witch variations or a new vampire," and I would just sketch whatever I wanted, send it to them with fabric suggestions, and then they'd make it up. Um,
Tony was saying that he loves Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Did you like that one?
Yes, Colleen Atwood can do virtually no wrong. Like Snow
Agreed.
White and the
Yes.
Huntsman is beautiful. Like Ravenna's
Oh,
dresses are incredible.
mhm.
I
Well,
love.
I have to say, by the way, about Colleen Atwood, because you know she did Wednesday. I think she had a co-designer on that. But
Mm-mm.
so a lot of people, like for some of the shows, they were saying, "Well, you know, it's during the pandemic and everything," and I'm like, "Yeah, but Wednesday, like it's flawless." Okay, there was a pandemic, but there everything on that show is absolutely flawless.
I
So
was working during the pandemic, doing like costume fittings in like basically like Ebola suits. Like I was in like full hazmat
that
gear,
is so
like as though a
crazy.
bag of anthrax had been released.
That's just
Um,
crazy.
It was insane. I was in costume fittings trying to pin delicate embroideries through like nuclear waste type gloves. Like
Did you get a
that.
picture of that? By the way, that would be
No,
like, and not for
no.
now.
I
Like, and
think
maybe it's not funny right now, but
I
later
feel
you'll look
like
back and you'll think
I
it's
feel like
hilarious.
I feel like one of my colleagues who was working on that dress has some photos on her Instagram of us fitting because it was for the Nevers. There was a character called Desiree, who was a sort of big brassy kind of curvy woman who was incredible. That most hilarious actress ever. I
I
remember
think I know who you're talking about. Yes.
I had to pin something to her cleavage, and I was like very awkward about it because I was literally having to touch her boob essentially. And I was like, "Oh, excuse fingers," and she was like, "Oh, don't worry about it, darling." Like she was
That's
hilarious.
so awesome.
She was hilarious, and I remember just being in the full thing, and I was like, "This is insanity." Like it wasn't an excuse for us working during it. It was not an excuse that it was COVID. So for people to be like, "Oh, give them a break, it was COVID," that is not true. During the
Mhm.
thing, we were like, "We still have to make this amazing." Like we
Yeah.
were, you know, we weren't using it as an excuse. It hampered our lives massively, but we
Yeah.
weren't using it as an
It was
excuse.
funny because my mom, she's fine, but she's in the hospital because she got COVID and then she got like, you know, complications. So we had to go there and they're still doing like we had to put on the gown and the mask and the face shield and the gloves. And I was like, it was so weird because we've been out of COVID for so long, but there's another little wave, I guess, coming through.
Yeah, my mum has it literally right now.
Oh,
Uh,
does she? Your mom has it as well?
yeah,
Oh my,
right.
is she okay?
She is okay, but because she had breast cancer, she's a cancer survivor, so her immune system is like non-existent, bless her. So any sort of thing she gets, but yeah, she tested positive like 2 days ago. So
Oh my gosh. Oh, the
yeah,
poor thing. So hopefully is she able to rest at home?
yeah. She doesn't
Okay.
work, so she'll be fine.
Oh,
But
I'm glad to hear that.
it
Well,
is
it's just my mom is like 89 and you know, you get
oh no,
really like my niece is like, you know, when you're a senior and you go into the hospital and you know, the
secondary
chances of coming out
infections.
again.
Yeah,
So, but she was just like no, she's doing great and so we're really you know, I'm
good.
so glad I'm so grateful. But
Yeah.
yeah, just weird downing up to go back into that again after so many years of
It
being
is
out of it.
crazy. It is crazy. And it's weird, like when you go to central London, because I don't wear masks virtually ever anymore.
No, me
Uh,
neither.
but it is weird when you go into central London and there's still quite a lot of people on tubes and stuff. Sometimes, if the tube is very packed, I do have a mask on me always in my
Yeah, me
bag.
too. Yeah.
Sometimes, if something is too packed, like where you're like this close to someone, I will wear one. Or if someone's coughing, even if they've just got a
Mhm.
cold, I don't really want it. So yeah, sometimes I will wear one, but it is weird now. It's kind of like a dream that you're kind of half remembering.
Yeah, it
Sort
is.
of.
It's really, that's what I was saying. It'll be fun for you to kind of look back at that. I mean, it won't, I mean, you know, at the time it must have been just awful, but then you can look back at it and sort of maybe kind of a good little laugh about it.
To be honest, it was more just a nuisance. We weren't kind of like
Yeah.
angry about it. We were a bit like, oh, this is stupid, because
Hmm.
like we were still like going over to each other's desks and sometimes having lunch, and like we'd go out for lunch and sit together at restaurants and stuff. So it was like a bit silly, some of the precautions, but they were more for the actors. But weirdly, on one job I was on, My Lady Jane, which will be out on Prime, I think, some point soon.
Oh, I love that story. Like the Queen for 8 days.
Yes.
Lady Jean Grey.
Yes.
I'll have to watch that. I love that story.
But it I don't think
it's like a modern twist.
I don't think frock flicks are gonna love it.
Frock flicks, forget them. Who cares about them?
I think it's very modern influenced. One cool thing was all the casting was like colorblind, so like we have a person of color being like Elizabeth I and stuff, which is pretty cool.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But it's fantasy, so like rather than Catholics versus Protestants, it's humans and then people who can turn into animals.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love that.
So that will be coming out on Prime.
So it's really more fantasy then. It's like fantasy with a historical sort of,
yeah. And there is a ridiculous amount of sex in it. Like I read all the scripts and there is like more sex than Game of Thrones. It is insane. There's so much sex in it. And the cast was really hilarious. Jim Broadbent, Rob Brydon, a lot of the younger cast were new. Marcus Blumel is the leading man in it, who's been
in quite a lot. Sorry?
Marcus Blumel. He was in Discovery of Witches.
Yes.
He was Marcus in that.
Yeah,
that guy. He's in Discovery of Witches. He was in that.
Yeah, both Jackie and I are like, we got to watch that because, like, I had True Blood was one of my favorite shows of all time, right? And I was thinking of going back and rewatching the whole thing.
I love True Blood. True Blood is fabulous.
Yeah. So again, you will love Bex because that's one of her favorite shows as well.
I don't think any series of that I didn't like. I didn't really love it when it became about like the vampires like council in like season 7 or whatever, where when most of it was like in the vampires like actual council chamber and Bill was like the leader of it. I didn't like that whole season.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. But I did love was it Russell? He was like my favorite.
Russell Edgington. He was.
And of course, the Queen of Louisiana, Rachel Evan Woods which I'd forgotten about her, but she was just absolutely stunning in that.
She was her like 50s like ivory. She wears like an ivory silk dressing gown at one point and has like fully Rita Hayworth from Gilda Jessica Rabbit hair. It's such an energy.
I've always loved her. I loved her in Westworld. Like, I kind of adore her.
She was great in American Horror Story too. She was really good in that. And I always forget that she was in Practical Magic.
Oh, was she one of the kids or something?
Yeah, she's the long-haired ginger kid in Practical Magic. Yeah, that's
wow. Because she's also in she's in that musical as well, like Across the Universe.
Yes, yeah. She's one of those people who like quietly does a lot of stuff and looks very different what hair color she's got, I think. Because I always forget
she's like a chameleon in many ways.
Yeah, I literally always forget she's in Westworld and she's like the main one, but she's blonde in that. And then in a lot of things she has sort of this hair color, which I think is her natural hair color, I think.
And then she's and then more recently she had it sort of like shaved on the side and kind of long, like kind of a more, because she's in a band, so she sort of has a bit like a slight punk kind of look about her. She is
fabulous.
Is she? Anna Paquin's walking with a cane. Does she have MS or something? Oh, I didn't hear that. I know she married Bill in real life.
So
they have
wild
babies.
That they've been married like since like season 1 or something. Like they met on the show, just fell in love, got married. I love stuff like that. Like I love that Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar are married because they were Fred and Daphne, and I just freaking live for that.
And you know what I learned recently? I didn't even know this, but Charming and Snow White in Once Upon a Time married as well.
Yeah, I did
in real life.
I tell you,
like they're just the cutest little couple.
I tell you what is funny. So the woman who plays Mrs. Hughes in Downton Abbey. She is married in real life to the guy who plays Mr. Gibbs in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Really?
Which is hilarious.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
The dude from Pirates of the Caribbean and Mrs. Hughes in Downton Abbey are married in real life.
Wow, that's
crazy. So funny to me.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was watching like Danny DeVito the other day. He's got a new show, I guess, and his daughter, who looks just like her mother, like just like the mom.
Yeah, because
and the two of them are so cute together. They have a new show, I guess they're doing together.
Oh, fun!
So,
I love
like,
that.
I don't even know if he's with Rita Perlman anymore. But yeah, so the daughter looks just like mom.
I don't think they are. You know, I have a feeling that they're not. Hi,
Margie.
I live for them in Matilda. That's
oh my gosh, Matilda's amazing. You know what, Cassie, my kids are teenagers, so what we've been doing is going back, like, you know, like we were talking about, what's that movie with Bette Midler you were mentioning earlier? Sorry.
Hocus Pocus.
Yes, Hocus Pocus. We went back, we've been going back and watching all the classics. Matilda. Yeah, but it was funny because my husband does audiovisual, and they were doing, like, you know, those outdoor movie theater nights that they had with the inflatable screen. So they did a series of them all across the city, and every night it was Matilda.
So Matilda's so good.
Which, you know, I mean, I was really happy that people who had never seen it had the opportunity to see it. But it was funny because we had just watched it with our family, and then here he was.
And then you're like, oh, I don't want to watch that again.
I don't want to watch it again. But yeah, we've been doing that. So we've been going back. Like, we're even watching old sci-fi, like, you know, like the Terminator, or, you know.
I love a classic.
You know,
I love like an Alien.
Like Alien.
Alien. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so my son, I told him, actually, I said, we should watch Psycho, because I had joked when he was younger that when he turns 18, he can watch Psycho. But he's watched things way more violent than that since then. So I said, but we still never watched Psycho. We got to watch Psycho.
I love Hitchcock. I think my favorite, obviously The Birds is great and Psycho is great, but my favorite is Rear Window.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes.
I love Rear Window. There's something so weird and disturbing about that concept of like watching your neighbor from afar and they've murdered someone, and like watching that weirdness of like them acting like a normal person, but you figure something's going on. And obviously Grace Kelly's in that and has some incredible dresses in that.
Oh yeah, and I think Edith Head designed that.
Yeah, Edith Head did do that. Yeah. I think she did most of his stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I think so. She did The Birds, I believe. Yeah, Tippi Hedren and
Hedren's lovely.
North by Northwest, and
I mean, she did everything. She was like the costume designer in that.
Oh, absolutely.
It was like her or Adrian. It was like
Adrian, yes.
Basically the two of them who
absolutely.
He did like The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind, I think. I don't think
I don't know that I think it was who did I think it was
Adrian did a lot of the stuff with Marilyn.
He did The Wizard of Oz for sure. He did a lot of the glam move, the silver screen stuff though, for sure.
I think he did Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and
yes, probably, yes.
Oh no, was that Travaia? That might have been Travaia. I lose track.
I know, me too. There's so many greats. I was thinking of actually watching every movie that Edith had won an Oscar for, and then doing a ranking, like rank them in order of what I thought was from.
I tell you,
because she's won 8 Oscars apparently.
The one movie that I think stuck with me always, costume wise, and probably inspired costume and drag for me really from that sort of era, was Calamity Jane with Doris Day.
Yes.
The costumes in that, I don't know what it is. They're just so beautiful. All the corsetry is impeccable. And there's one outfit that Katie Brown wears that if I get on Drag Race, I will have someone make me, because it is wild. It's like a walking suit from late 1880. So it's a very small bustle. And it's like a sort of tailored jacket, almost like a kind of magician's assistant jacket-ish, with a very small peplum. And then the front has like an apron drape, and all of it is like royal blue velvet.
Oh.
But the waistcoat and the tie, she has like a big bow at her neck, and the waistcoat is like a dark plummy purple. and then she has a hat which perches very far forward on her head and is kind of like a teardrop shape in the blue velvet. But on the top of it are two birds' wings that are
Oh my
dyed the
gosh.
same. They're dyed the same royal blue, and it is so like camp and theatrical. It is one of the most beautiful costumes ever. It's wild.
The one movie I have to see that I have never seen, but the design for the outfits is amazing, is this one with Shirley MacLaine, and where she's wearing like a pink wig and a pink like fur coat, and she's like getting out of a car, but all of her, and then she has a yellow one, and she just has these crazy outfits, and Edith Head did it. I have to watch that. So so I was thinking of doing that. I thought it would be really fun to watch all of Edith Head's Oscar movies. It would be so hard to rank them though.
He's got such a specific style, and like it's hard when you're doing that kind of thing because a lot of what she was doing was obviously 50s. And the 50s, I think more so than any era in movies, really like forced the 50s silhouette and design sense on whatever era they were designing for. Like when you watch like The King and I, you can see the 50s in like the dresses, despite
and like I think that's Irene.
And you can see it in like everything.
It's like the 70s. Like I always find that like costumes, historical costumes done in the 70s always have like the makeup, like, you know, I was looking at Dune, which is late 70s, the first Dune, and like I'm like, oh my god, the hair and the makeup, like it's so like of that period kind of thing.
I feel like that's for sure. And then like the 80s, I feel like were fine because there's a lot of merchant and ivory stuff from the 80s and like Dangerous Liaisons, which I think you don't
that's true.
However, you notice it when the 80s do future, like in Alien, like everyone has a perm, you know. I think you notice weirdly when they go further forward in like the 80s, but
that's why I love like Blade Runner, because they kind of went with like a film noir sort of thing, like and 40s, they used Adrian actually as inspiration for the clothing for Rachel. So I love that like I just recently watched, which by the way is so brilliant, is Jack, what's it called? Dark City with Jennifer Connelly and Rufus Sewell, who's British. And it's kind of a science fiction, you know, future story, but again, has that sort of film noir kind of feeling, like it's a murder mystery. So the costumes in it are just, so amazing. And everything takes place at night. So it's always sort of like night wear and night outfits, but they have all these, but then there's these sort of like creatures and stuff that are in it too, which is really cool. Cause I was kind of like, someone said to me, I watched it again because someone said some of the outfits in Dune reminded them of Dark City. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that movie. So went back and watched it.
Yeah, I'll have to. I've not seen that. Blade Runner is incredible. That's Michael something?
Michael Kaplan.
That one suit of Rachel's that's like the chevron, like black at the bottom, white at the top, shades of grey, is incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, because I did a review on it, and I did find some of you know, Adrian's outfits that were kind of, you know, although like they really made it their own, because they had the fake crocodile in there and everything, because you know there's no actual reptiles, they're all dead or you know, extinct. So they did add in, and then the furs, the faux furs and stuff like that, which were just like amazing, with the stand-up collar and the
that was incredible. And like I love when an I do love when an outerwear and the base thing are the same. Like I know we were talking about the Gilded Age where the cloak and the dress were the same and not liking it, but I would have if the fabric was nice. Like I think
that's probably what it was. Yeah, I just felt like in some cases, especially with Marion, oftentimes it just looked like a bit of an afterthought. Like someone said, she needs to have something that she takes off when she gets there, and they just like, well, we have some extra fabric. I just sort of
the one costume that hurt my soul in the Gilded Age was the one in like the first costume Bertha wears in episode 1, where she's like sitting down and getting dressed, and then she goes somewhere, and it's like a pale pink floral print with a lot of brown in it, and then she had like weird bits of like brown scalloped lace, like half of the bodice under the sleeve, and then the hat was huge. Like,
Oh, is that her Easter outfit?
yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, so ugly. That lace did not need to be there at all. It was
Well,
like,
you know, I actually thought, like in my review, I thought it was better than season 1. Like some of the things
oh
in
no,
season
season
1 were
2
just
was
so weird. Like she
season
would
2
be
was
wearing
much
this
better.
dress, and then they would just sort of stick some feathers in there, and they would just be kind of, you know, weirdly, or she'd have like kind of an Elizabethan collar, but it was all like wonky. You
Yeah.
know, there was just some things just weren't quite like I don't, and people would get mad at me, and I'm like, hey man, I don't know, I've got eyes in my head, like I can't help myself if I can see what they look like.
If something, the problem with the Gilded Age, and the reason I get very passionate about that show in particular, is because I love 1890, and also the fit of everything is impeccable, the hair and makeup is great, and a lot of the costumes are like 98% perfect, but then there's one thing that's really random and throws the entire thing off. So I get more passionate when something's almost beautiful than if something is actually just hideous. If something is hideous, I can just be like, well, there's no part of that I really vibe with. But if something is like 85% there, but then there's a horrible lace or a flower that doesn't vibe or match, that upsets me more because it could have been amazing, but wasn't because of a small thing.
Yeah, and it was funny because I've been trying to figure out like sometimes I'm like, why isn't this working for me? Like I can't always, and I'm sure this happens for you too. I'll be watching a show and I'll be trying to figure out why is this not working for me? And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's the fit or the fabrics are weird or something. But sometimes I can't quite figure it out. And I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's just like a symmetry thing, it's a balance thing, or like you say, someone just is sort of like, why did they drop that thing on there? It's just so random. Sometimes it feels like sometimes things are just so
it happened
I
to
can't
me.
quite always put my finger on it is what I'm trying to say.
The closest I had a very similar thing, because generally I know it instantly when there's something that's wrong, but the one that recently that got me was, have you just seen the Wicked movie posters came out recently?
Oh, okay, I'll have to look at them. No, I haven't.
Yeah, and Madame Morrible's, everything looks great, but Madame Morrible's dress, there were things about it that I couldn't quite place, and then I spoke to my friend and I was like, that's the problem. So she kind of has like it's almost like a sort of long sort of like Scarlet Witch coat kind of thing that goes into an A-line kind of trained thing. And my problem with it is that the split is kind of too low. I'd have liked it to have an opening like Danny's marine dresses, where they had that like kind of
I love that
kind of opening with the leggings and the boots. I'd have liked that. I'd have liked a higher split. And there was some embroidery that were like big astrolabe kind of planet movements that were like very big circles sort of on the hips. I was like, I don't mind that, but I'd have preferred it to have been slightly more broken up and in and out. And then the collar was sort of too high and the sleeves were too small and the lapel was too big. Like it was just slightly tweaking things, but the fabric was beautiful, the construction was beautiful, but there were just like 2 or 3 things that I was like, just a small proportional tweak in the toile stages would have made that like.
There's a famous Canadian painter, and he used to get accused of cheating all the time, but I actually thought this was really clever. So what he would do is he would say mock up a painting, and then to make sure that it was working, he would look at it in a mirror, and I always thought that was so clever. And then he could kind of tell by looking at it in a mirror if it was off balance or there was something off about it. And then he would go and he would change. And people used to say he was cheating. And I'm like, well, I don't know. He's using the tools. I mean, it's not like or you take a photo of it and then you could reverse it or that type of thing.
To be fair, sometimes I will take a photo of if I'm doing a drag look and I'm just taking photos of it. Sometimes I will take a photo and I'll be like, what is up with this? And then I'll flip it and one of the eyebrows will be noticeably more off in that. So then I'll just edit it,
So I think
that
it's just like
does.
using the tools you have. So it's sort of like it's sort of, you know, it's sort of like standing back. Sometimes you know, like say if you make a toile, like a mock-up of a costume, and you just kind of stand back and just say, okay, there's something not quite right with this. Maybe we could pin the collar so it's a bit smaller, or oh yeah, that's it. You know, but sometimes I'm wondering though if it is just they don't have the time. Like this is what I oftentimes wonder.
Yeah, it'll be just we need a bit more brown in that. Because the thing that
Mm.
Carragher always says for embroidery is she always says just like step back quite frequently and like squint at it and
Mhm.
see if like the colors are doing things. Because like 90% of the time, I've only recently sort of, after doing silo, I kind of really realized that with embroidery, if you're looking for like a platinum colored thread that's like gold and silvery and you can't find it, use a gold and a silver in the embroidery together. And when you step back and on camera, your eye kind of blurs them
Oh yeah, that makes
to
sense.
be one color. Like there were a few things on silo where I didn't have the right thread because it was an awkward, like every single fabric for silo season 2 was custom dyed.
And this is
So
when you were talking about you were doing you had to cover the seams on the
oh no,
clothing.
no, this is for silo season 2. That was
Oh, silos. Sorry. Okay.
yeah. So
I'm getting my
there were
shows mixed up.
there were quite a few things where I needed like an awkward shade of red or mustard yellow or green. There was a green that was kind of very much on the border of green and of olive green and like mustard yellow. And I was like, well, I don't really have exactly the right colors. So in the end, I mixed like a teal and a mustard. And like I sort of did the central line in mustard and then wrapped with the blue. So there were like sort of diagonal lines, like a candy cane stripe, if you like, of blue and yellow. But then when you step back and put it against the green, it looked green.
That's amazing. So there's a tool, a technique that you've learned that you know, you could pass on.
Well, Michelle does it
That's
a lot.
helpful.
Like that's
Yeah,
why a
because a
lot of
lot of
her,
times, I mean, you can't pop out to the shops and just, okay, I got to get more thread or something. You know, you're working with what you have.
and it just looks visually richer. Like
Mhm.
a lot of the things that Michelle does, and one of the reasons her things are so beautiful is because she uses sort of unexpected color where you wouldn't where I sort of wouldn't put it. Like there are a few pieces where she uses silver and copper and gold. And I personally, when I wear an outfit, I don't mix metals. I just do one. But when she puts them all together, it just looks so rich and
Mhm.
deep and just beautiful and textural. So I'm definitely trying
Oh,
to do
there's no
that more.
spoilers. There's no spoilers.
No, no,
No worries. And anyways, Cassie can't talk about it anyway, so she wouldn't be allowed
no,
to do that.
yeah, no.
I just want to say this is interesting. We're having some color discussion. We're going to wrap up shortly, guys, because we've been here a few hours and I'm keeping you so long. I really
No
appreciate
worries,
it,
it's all
though.
good. It's all good.
It's
Don't worry.
so fun. Pink and brown. I love pink and brown together, but maybe what the issue was the combination of like the fabric with that weird
It was the
trim.
lace, and it
The
was a very
lace.
wide lace, and the brown was an awkward kind of terracotta-ish brown for
Mhm.
me. Um, it was the placement of the lace, because if they'd have used it in a cuff gathered small or a narrow edging or on the hat in like rosettes or something, it was just a very wide, like it was about this wide, I think.
Oh, that's
And it
very
was a
wide. Yeah.
it was a very bold, jagged, scalloped edge, like zigzag of this awkward brown. And it was like on the sleeves and then like half the bodice. It was like half draped under some fabric, so it got cut really weirdly. It it did not do it for me, that dress at all. I was very, very upset by that.
Yeah,
that
I think
dress.
actually, yeah, Gladys's her outfit I think was much nicer. She had the blue Easter
She had
Sunday
a
one.
she had quite a lot of nice dresses this.
Her outfits actually, I was saying that in my video review, is that her outfits were actually I think some of my favorite. But I
Yeah,
think it was actually the other lady, Edith, Enid, who actually kind of really got into her outfit. Some of her outfits were really nice.
yeah, there were a couple of things that were really, really, really beautiful. Yeah, Gladys, I think she had one dress that was like a kind of, I think she was wearing it when the Duke came to dinner and Bertha was trying to sort of force her to marry him essentially, and it was like a kind of like orangey hot pink.
Oh yeah, yes.
That was beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
And her
and there's
hair
one
was,
dress that she wears, I think with the was it that what she's having, is that with the Duke? Is that the one you're talking about?
yes, yeah,
Oh,
like
and then but
hot
there's another one
orangey pink.
is when all what's his name is like proposing to her. I can't remember his name, sorry.
The gay
But
guy. Yeah.
yeah, poor guy.
Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't live then, like not being able
Yeah,
to.
oh yeah, that would be a horrid. Yeah, it'd be awful. But yeah, no, I think so. She had some nice things. So anyway, so I think like season 1, I was like, but then season 2, I was actually okay. There's quite a lot of good stuff here.
Weirdly, I think my favorite costumes in all of the Gilded Age are like the servants' costumes because
The
they're
servants,
like
I just did a video on the servants, or at least the one house. I'm doing the next one, but I love the servants as well.
The fabrics are beautiful, and it's like in Downton Abbey, like the costumes are great, but it's that era of corsetry that isn't as extreme, and there's no like body padding. So to see a servant with like a tiny waist and like a full bust and hip that's padded out, I love that. Like the impracticality of like a servant wearing like a tight laced corset and like padding is insane, but in the funnest way. Yeah, I love like the housekeeper's dress, and you know.
And one of the things that I was reading, and I love this, is that Cassia, the costume designer, she was saying this, and I kind of love this idea, is that at the holidays, like at Christmas time, the families would give the servants fabric, and then they would make their outfits from that. And I love that idea. I thought that was such a brilliant, because it would be very expensive.
Yeah, you see that in Downton Abbey. There's a Christmas special. Mary gives Anna something, and she's like, "Oh, just the usual fabric for a frock, I'm afraid." Like that was.
Oh, okay.
That was like a real thing from about like middle of the 1800s. And in fact, one of the reasons that becoming a housekeeper, a maid, sorry, was a bit expensive to start with was because the employer, depending on how high up in the society they were, wouldn't provide the uniform.
Oh, really?
Sometimes the maids would have to basically use their first month's wages to like get an advance on the thing to buy their uniform, or buy the fabric, make their uniform, and then they'd have to basically work a month for free in order to sort of get the job. Like that was
that's crazy common. Because like the liveries that the male servants wear would be so expensive.
Those were generally always provided because I know that footmen were chosen specifically for height and attractiveness, and they had to be over 6 foot but not over 6'5", which was rare because history people were shorter. And footmen generally, they didn't bother learning your name. They would just choose an English name like James, George, Frederick, and just call them that. And sometimes footmen, even if they had 6 or 8 footmen across a decade, say, and there were 2 of them, they would always call them James and George. It would be like an inherited thing.
Oh my lord, the British.
Foul. The British aristocracy, like one of the reasons I do historical drag is because I find it so fun to poke fun at like the ridiculous bullshit that like the aristocracy have done for centuries.
Oh, by the way, Cassie, I don't know if you've seen The Gentleman. I think you will love it. And the costumes are really good too. But it's a really great show. It's Guy Ritchie.
Oh, I've seen the first one. Because there was a film. I think this is like
it's sort of in the same, I think, in the same universe as the film.
I haven't seen the second one, but I saw the first one.
Oh, it's really good.
That had Michelle Dockery in, who was Mary in Down, and I thought that.
And then in the TV series, it's sorry, I forgot his name, but he was also in Downton Abbey. He had a one episode. Sorry, James, what's his name? Something James.
One of the footmen.
He's the main character in the TV series of the Gentleman.
Oh, Theo James.
Theo James. Thank you. Yeah. So he's the main character.
He was the Turkish diplomat who died in Mary's
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I thought was really funny. Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to, footmen had to be attractive. Sounds good to me. Yeah. And also like, I guess that makes sense regarding their height. Cause you would want them all, like, especially like if you're in a big house.
It was a status symbol.
A status symbol.
You had your footmen, and often footmen were the most arrogant in the house because they were chosen for their attractiveness. They wore the most expensive livery. They got paid like 20 or 30% more than all the household staff except the housekeeper and the butler and the cook. They were peacocks, and they did like flirt with everyone. You know, that was kind of part of it. You know, I think it was kind of, to be honest, for the women of the house. Like,
for
I
sure.
think they would be like, yeah, he's hot. Let's have him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in Downton Abbey, like at least in the Brooke household, they only have the one guy.
He's
like they
cute,
got
but he
is cute, but he's short though. He's a bit short, I think.
He's cute.
Whereas in the other house, the Russell household, they have a bunch of them, or they bring. I think for like if they do a big dinner, they bring them in.
They hired
them.
Yeah, that was the thing that people would do for like big things. Yeah, the guy who plays the footman in the Brooke house is really cute, but
he is cute.
He has a very like next door's dog kind of energy. Do you know what I mean?
Like and they've given him a
kind of energy.
They've given him sort of a Brooklyn accent, so he just sort of has a bit. I don't know why they did that, but
it doesn't do it for me personally.
But he is kind of cute. Yeah, he's sort of like a puppy guy. Well, anyway, so Cassie, why don't you tell everybody where they can find me? I mentioned earlier that you're on Instagram, but what's the best places for people to follow you and find you and all that? Here, I'll put it on.
I'm on Facebook, Casta_Hex. Instagram is the same, CASTA_HEX, and on TikTok, I believe is just Casta Hex. I don't think there's any underscores, but yeah, you'll be able to find me. If you find a page,
even if you just Google your name, it comes up.
Yeah, it should come up. So,
how did you get your name, by the way? Where did that come from?
It came from, I wanted it to be a pun that was magical, and I've always loved the word hex because it's just got a lot of. It conjures things in your mind. It conjures like black magic. It conjures like dark, sexy witches, because I think it sounds like sex. So
yes, it does. You're right.
I like that. It conjures like evil, like the witch from The Witch, like a sexy woman in a red cloak in the woods. It makes me think that. But there was a Monster High doll who was called Casta Fierce, and she was like a rip-off of Beyonce, and she was like a witch who was a musician, and she had her like mic stand was a broomstick. Like, it was a vibe.
Oh yeah. I like that.
And then growing up, I was obsessed with the Hex Girls from Scooby-Doo. And I've performed like the Hex Girls as songs from the Scooby-Doo and the Witches Ghost movie quite a lot. So it was kind of like an amalgamation, really.
I think wasn't there a series called Hex with Michael Fassbender? That's when I first saw him, and he was like he played they were witches, I think.
Oh no, I'll have to watch that.
Let me look here. I think it's called Hex. I could be wrong. Maybe someone in the chat will know. But I was like, because I remember when I watched the show, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And it was Michael Fassbender, you know, with his his cheekbones were so, you know, like. So let me just double check if it was Hex. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, it's called Hex. So it's from is a fallen angel and leader of the so he's a fallen angel. Sorry, not a witch.
Oh, okay. I'll have to watch that. That sounds good.
It's from 2012.
Okay, I'll have a look.
But he looks very dreamy in it, like very, you know, Michael Fassbender. It looked like they dyed his hair because, you know, I think he's a ginger, but they dyed his hair sort of a darker color. But I remember when I first saw it, I was like, whoa, who is this guy? You know?
Yeah, fair. That's how I
very
felt. Very
2000 sounding.
That's how I felt when I watched Versailles. And Duke Philippe just does everything to my body. Like, That actor, his name's Alexander Vlahos, and he was in Merlin. He played Mordred.
Oh, okay. My husband loved that show.
He was hot in that, but when he had the like center parted, long, loose black waves and like 17th century menswear, and he was gay in that show, to be fair. And he did drag.
Okay, wonderful.
He also did drag as well. Like he turns up to the French court in a 17th century woman's outfit with the that shaped hair, you know.
Oh yes.
It was such a vibe. And he's having like public, like he's like on the arm of his boyfriend who was like blonde and kind of looked like a lion. It was like, such a vibe.
Yeah, that's like Sully and who's in House of the Dragon season 1. Oh my God, that guy. He is stunning.
Who does
he plays the boyfriend of the one that gets killed.
Yeah, the one who Kristen Cole like kills.
Kristen Cole bludgeons to death. Sorry, hopefully you guys have seen it.
I loathe and despise Kristen Cole so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't stand him. He's such a like, oh, I'm sorry. Like the girl said no to you. Deal with it. Don't beat an innocent gay to death on the steps. Like, I was so angry. I hate the like, we have a cute gay romance and then they die. Like,
it's always it's the kill the gays, right?
I hated poor Renly getting that shadow blade through his throat and then Loris getting blown up. Like, I loved their relationship so much, and it bothered me so much that was like the one improvement from the books, that their relationship got proper development and screen time. I was so angry. I was like, no.
I know. I know. It was like, is it Lexa in The 100? I don't know if you watched that.
No, I don't.
There was a huge outrage about that. But anyway, I hope will you come back again? Like we have so much to talk about every time you come on.
Whenever. I'm virtually never doing anything. So,
and then as I was mentioning to you, I would love to have you come on and do like a Game of Queens for, House of the Dragon. It'll be so fun. Yeah, and Tatiana always has her fans and stuff. She always has her fans, and she always has her boas and her fans, and she's just very like so fun. It'll be just a blast.
I'll wear my Targaryen ish dress.
Yeah, I'm not taking a side, like I said.
For me, it's got to be the black side, just because I hate Alicent. I hate.
Well, Kristen is just Kristen. Even if you like the greens, I don't know how you can possibly even like Kristen.
No.
By the way, I called him. Tatiana had called him Sir Krispy Kreme, like Krispy Kreme donut.
Same. Same.
Oh, you call him that as well? Okay, well maybe it's
like
a thing that
like I called Bran in the original show Bran Flakes.
Oh, okay. Well, I called him Sir Krispy Kreme one day on Instagram or on Twitter, and do you know that I got dogpiled?
Why?
Like, I mean, like I'm a mom, and I got all these people were like attacking me, telling me that I was immature, and I said, "What? It was just a joke. What's wrong with you people?"
People get
the Greens came after me in droves.
House of the Dragon does inspire a lot of like, it's got to be Team Red for me, because I do love Daemon. He's a psycho.
He is.
Matt Smith is great.
Oh, he's amazing. He's so good. He has the most interesting voice, by the way. It's kind of a little bit higher pitched, but not like it's like a little bit girly, but then not. I don't know how to describe it.
He is just as charming in person.
Oh, have you met him?
I did quite a lot of his.
Oh, you mentioned that. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Season 2. I didn't go into fitting with him, but he like walked through the studio and was very excited and about everything that we were making for him. And he's sort of shorter than I imagined in my head, but actors are always shorter than I imagined, because obviously on TV they look huge.
And I always find their foreheads are really big. Like I always find they have really big. We always say they have such big foreheads. Like, and I think there's because for some reason if it looks maybe in person it might look slightly off, but on camera it looks amazing.
Well, it's because in like I have to sit a certain way for drag. You sort of tilt your head down a bit, and cameras are positioned slightly like at eye line or slightly higher generally, which makes your forehead look smaller, as opposed to like
Yeah. So I always find when I you'll meet an actor and you're like, oh wow, like you look totally. But I have to tell you this story years ago when I was working on a film. I had this guy come and pick me up like for locations, and it turned out he was an actor, but he was like kind of wasn't working at the time, so he took like a locations job driving people around,
Oh
or
wow.
or maybe transport. Sorry. But I knew him right away. He was a really well-known Canadian actor, and he was probably the most gorgeous person I'd ever met in person in my life. And
Mm.
I was actually like, when you hear about someone being so good looking and then you meet them, you're like almost without words. I could barely talk. And he was asking me all these questions. It's like, oh, so what are you doing on the movie, Heidi? And like just asking me all these different questions. And I'm like, uh completely. Even though he wasn't a big star, like I knew him because he had been pretty successful in Canada as an actor. And then I said to somebody, why the hell is he working driving locations or driving people around? And they're like, oh, because sometimes things get slow and they pick
God,
up work.
my brain instantly, if someone I found attractive said, "What are you doing on this?" I would be like, "You under a craft services table
I would have been
during
fired.
lunch break."
Yeah, oh my
Like,
God, that's hilarious. I would have loved to hear you say that.
I'd have just been like,
I'm doing
what
it
are
during
you doing?
lunch
What are
break.
you doing on this movie? I don't know. What are you doing during your lunch break? Because it's gonna
Oh
be
my
me
God.
under
Can
a
you call
craft
in
services
sick? What are you
table.
doing later? Can you call in sick?
Yeah, like we
Oh my
need to
gosh, you are
find
so funny.
we need to find at least a 6-inch gap in your
Yeah,
schedule.
I've never had that happen to me before. Oh, no, you know what? Actually, that's not true. There was another time I went over to my brother's house, and I was meeting up with him, and his friend was there, and she like lived in Australia, and she knew all these people from like the Australian ballet for some reason. And so for some reason she had a ballet dancer from the Australian ballet there. And I walked in and she's like, oh, Heidi, this is my friend. And I'm like, I just went, oh my God, you're so gorgeous. Like it's just like it just
It's
spilled
weird.
out of my mouth.
The person that I was very like, oh my God, you're beautiful, was
Yeah.
the guy who was in the Nevers. He was very famous. He's become very famous recently because he was in a show that went massive in the UK called Happy Valley. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Oh yes, I've heard. It's the same person who did Nell, I think.
Yes,
Renegade Nell.
yes, yeah. I forget his name. James Norton Nolan, something like that. I always found him attractive in everything, and then I bumped into him on the Nevers. I went down to the toilet to use the gents' toilet, and literally bumped into him because he was coming out. And I looked up and up and up because he's like 6'4", and I'm 6 foot, so I'm quite tall. But he was like 6'4", 6'5", and I was just like, like it was very uncomfortable because I was like bumping into him coming out of the toilet. He was just going to a fitting. No, in fact, it was a makeup test because he was not wearing a shirt at the time because they were going to paint him gold
Oh
for this scene,
wow.
where he's like painted to look like a golden statue that's Greek. So he's like completely naked, basically painted gold, and then in
Oh
like a
my
chiffon,
gosh.
loincloth, and he was shirtless
Yeah.
going
Oh,
to the
James
makeup
Norton.
thing.
Yes.
And I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like it was a lot for
Well, it
my
was the same with the ballet
body.
dancer because usually you think ballet dancers are not that tall. But this guy was, well, he was 6'1" at least. But anyways, but luckily because he was my brother's girlfriend's friend, he was very, very nice and everything. But
Yeah.
I just kind of like, what,
Well, I was lucky that I didn't. I was lucky that when I was at the Mary and George thing, I didn't have to speak. I was like within 5 foot of the Gallet sign. But if I'd have had to speak to him, I don't think I would have been able to say anything because he's so attractive.
Yeah. It must be weird though, walking around in life like that. Like it must be very strange just to be like stunningly gorgeous.
Yeah, I think pretty privilege is like the most not talked about thing. Like there's that social experiment where there's like someone on a train and like someone attractive will like wolf whistle or pinch someone's butt or something, and they're like a 10. and someone's like very flattered and like tries to talk to them, and then like a normal person does it and it's like a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like, how dare you touch me, blah 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 blah, blah. Like it's not talked about at all. I think it's such a social disease that like that meme that was like that prisoner who had like murdered like 2 people, but he was attractive, and it was like, wow, we should let him out because he's so hot. That guy. Do you
Oh
remember
my
that photo that
gosh,
went
that's
around?
awful. Well,
Remember that
Ted
photo that
Bundy
went around?
apparently was handsome,
He
but he's a
maybe
total
by 60s standards, but he had like a uni, but he had like a
60s handsome.
but he had like a unibrow and like
Well,
all his
I didn't
beauty
find him
standards.
attractive, but people said in person, like he was very charming, very,
Well, people said the same about Jeffrey Dahmer. All the gay people in
really?
Milwaukee, everyone in Milwaukee, all the gay people in the gay scene thought he was like, a bit of a stud muffin.
Wow. Anyways, guys, well, Cassie, I'm gonna I really, really thank you so much for spending time with us. And you look beautiful.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you
spending
because I know
and then I'm going to bed.
I know it took you a long time to probably get dressed and everything, so we really appreciate it.
Sorry.
Well, anyways, guys, thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And I think we're going to do a Shogun live stream next Thursday. So I think that's what's on the schedule. And then we'll have Cassie back. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Oh, and I think